Okay, here we go. This is the full Duskmorn draft set review. Yesterday, we covered the introduction and multicolored and white cards, and as well as the shape of the format and a general sense of how you should approach drafting this format, including the scale of graveyard to enchantments across the different colors. Uh, Today, we are going to be covering the other four colors, all of the commons and uncommons in black, blue, green, and red in no particular order. Uh, in addition to how each archetype is likely to fare. So we're using the Scuffle review system. That's my own review system. I give everything a number on a scale of 1 to 10. A 1 is a card you should never play. A 2 is a card you should do your best not to play. 3 is replaceable. 4 is solid. You'll have lots of 4s. 5 is a strong card. Ideally, your deck is a lot of 5s, as long as a few 6s, which is a 6 is something you should play in a given color or deck. A 7 is a card that pulls you into that color or deck. An 8 is a card you should put some work into playing, whether that's splashing or building your deck around or moving things around to make it fit. A 9 is a reason to be that color. It's not a reason. You should be that color when you see a 9. And a 10 is a card you always play. You won't see very many 10s. But I also give everything a floor, the worse a card will be, a ceiling, the best a card will be, and then an amount of effort that is generally required to bridge that gap. So that includes sideboard grades, diminishing returns, situational cards, cards that you're going to have to put some work in to build around. And generally, your job as a drafter is during the draft and during your deck construction and as you play, you're going to try and raise the value of all of your cards as close to that ceiling as possible. So a card might have a ceiling at a 10, like Clement in the last set was a blue-green frogs deck. It was a 10 in the frogs deck, but not a 10 everywhere. You had to already have a lot of frogs. Put the effort into getting your cards as close to 10 as possible. So this set is Duskmorn. We'll be looking at doors and archetypes. A lot of cards fit in specific archetypes. A lot of cards are a little more flexible. Since we're doing colors today, very generally, we covered white yesterday. White in this set requires an unusually high amount of planning, so there's more of a gap between the floors and the ceilings, and the how you play with it is going to change how those cards work. Green has lots of cards that are strong, but not a lot of cards that are insane. Most of the green cards are going to be 5s and 6s. They play closer to their ceilings without a lot of work. That means that we'll likely see green cards overperform at the beginning of this format. Blue has lots of highs and lows, and the decks that can bring the blue cards up to those highs or find places for them to support those highs are going to do the best. Black cards are unusually synergistic, and that's because very generally in this set, cards are on a graveyard to enchantment scale. Colors, green cares a lot about the graveyard, blue cares a lot about the enchantments, and most of these cards in between are somewhere in between. Black's right in the middle. So some cards in black care a lot about enchantments, some cards care a lot about graveyards, and in general, there's more of a divide over which decks each of those colors can be in. Red is unusually good at killing stuff. There's a lot of good removal, and there's some red control decks available in addition to red aggro decks. With that, all that in mind, let's get started. Do we have any requests for a first color? We can do black, blue, green, or red today. Otherwise, we're doing a D4. What gives the most context? Yeah, okay, let's start with black. All right, so we did talk about this one yesterday, but I filled it out a little bit since then. Wait, this one. So, black white is Reanimator. It's really cool in this set. In general, the cards that you need to prioritize as you're drafting are your reanimation spells. There's not a ton of them, but you also don't need a ton of them. Then your reanimation targets. There are a lot of good reanimation targets, and if you see a high power rare, then you should take that first. Then survivability, and then enablers. And you don't have to pick your enablers super high because they're plentiful, they're strong, And a lot of the cards that you're trying to reanimate self-enable, like the land cyclers, they'll discard themselves, and then you can reanimate it. And yeah, you're only saving 2 mana when you reanimate the 4/5 flyer that you just cycled for a planes. But 2 mana is a lot, and it already got you a planes. Figure out what you can do with the spells you can't cast. Like, yes, the 6 mana creatures are not as exciting to reanimate, and the 5 mana creatures aren't as exciting to reanimate, but you can cast them if you don't have the reanimation spells. And then figure out what the value is that you're getting from your early creatures. So yesterday we looked at some white creatures that loot, some white creatures that block really well, maybe some survival creatures. You can pull extra value out of those creatures before they enable these reanimation spells. Looters are especially valuable in Black-White Reanimator because they get to discard the extra pieces. Manifest Dread does enable it. It's true, because you look at the top 2, you get to choose which of those get put into the graveyard. And like, yes, there's some of the best enablers are looters, but there's also a lot of like 2 mana 2/2s, 3 mana 3/2s that surveil on attack. You have things like that available. And you can splash other colors in black-white, but you really have to be base black-white to play cards like Rite of the Moth, which have 3 colored pips on both halves. But you can also surveil your Rite of the Moth into the graveyard and flash it back. Blue-black Eerie Grind is next. General pick order goes survivability, then focus. You need to decide whether you're focusing more on your graveyard or more on your enchantments. Like this Sphere of Infinity, for instance, it's more of an eerie card than a graveyard card, because yes, you can mill it or surveil it into your graveyard and pick it up, but you can also loot it away and play the enchantments, and you don't have to care about your graveyard to make that happen. There's not as much to do with the graveyard in this color combination, but a little bit of recursion goes a long way. Then you need to figure out your win condition. Oh, sorry, I did not need to put survivability twice. Value was supposed to be last. Survivability up here includes life gain, but interaction in general. You can do removal, but removal is not the only way to do this. Blue has a lot of good bounce spells and counter spells available, a lot of good tempo plays, a lot of good life gain. Fear of Infinity does get better in multiples, Theo. You can add, like, gaining 4 life return is pretty good. And you should try and figure out what your win condition is here. Maybe you don't need such a good win condition if you have the value, because there's good win conditions available. Figure out how you're answering their engine. That's what this survivability is about. Maybe you need to just block well to deal with survival. That's when this Fear of Infinity isn't as good. Maybe you need to kill their creature because they have 1 key creature and lots of creatures they don't care about in their red-black sacrifice deck. Maybe you just need counter spells because all of their creatures manifest dread when they come into play, and they're all 2-for-1s anyway. Figure out whether you're winning with flyers. If you're winning with flyers, that changes the removal that works. There's a bunch of enchantments that make creatures lose abilities. Figure out what you can win with mill. There is a very powerful eerie mill enabler, but you have to go all in on that, because if you mill your opponent a little, you're just giving them delirium. You can do it with value. If you then only takes a few Fear of Infinities if your removal is good enough. That's tough but not impossible. Or bombs. If you have a couple, 2, 3 really good bombs in your blue-black deck, then you can get there. You can last, you can draw them, you can mill them and return them, but you have to have them in your 40. Up next, green-black Delirium. So you need your on-curve plays for this deck. You can't let your opponent get their survival triggers going early. Broodspinner is a really good example of this. You need your blockers or your attackers, but there's a lot of good just 2-mana Manifest Dread. That's going to do the job most of the time, but you need to take those. Then you need your removal. You need kind of a lot of it, and not just creature removal. You need interaction for artifacts and enchantments and the weird, difficult to interact with engines that your opponent's going to be trying to set up against you. Then you need to figure out what your late game is. Broodspinner is a good example of a strong late game. Just 5 insects is solid. Ways to develop value when you have lots of mana. Rooms also do it. Like unlocking a good room, something that maybe you got late, is going to do this job for you. And then card advantage. And you might notice Broodspinner does all 4 of these things. That's why this card is such a high rate. Like, it is your on-curve play. It's not removal, but it is also late game and card advantage. Yes, Broodspinner does all the things this deck wants to do. It is worth first picking Broodspinner to play green-black Delirium. Figure out what your plan is for getting Delirium. That's Brood Spinner. Brood Spinner is a good one. There's a lot of single cards. There's 4 single cards available that enable Delirium by themselves. You cast them and now you have Delirium. But you can also just do it without those cards if you have enough Manifest Dread. You can do it with Brood Spinners if you have enough Brood Spinners and you're surveilling enough. This is a great color combination for splashing because you can manifest the cards you don't need. There's a lot of good fixing available in green that's kind of incidental but slow. So you want it for value, not for power. And then figure out if you really need that ramp. Like when you ramp in green-black, you're giving up plays that you would otherwise want. So we'll talk about a good example in green, but there's like a 2-mana 0/4, right? There's a 2-mana 0/4 that taps for a mana. In other sets, that would be really good. But you really want your 3-mana plays in this deck, and that 2-mana 0/4 doesn't block very well. So you're okay playing a land every turn, playing a spell every turn in green-black Delirium. Lastly, we have Red-Black Sacrifice. This is one of the ones I'm most excited to play. Red-Black Sacrifice has key cards. There are cards, like, you can make Green-Black Delirium work with general card quality across all of Green-Black. You don't need Brood Spinners. It's obviously better with Brood Spinners. But you can make this work with any 2-mana manifest creature because that's a 2-drop that puts something into graveyard. You're trying to get a little extra value out of everything. Red-Black needs specific cards. You need threatens and sack outs. You need to pair things. You need Sawblade Skin Rippers to be your late game cards. You are looking for lots of little 2-card combos. You can run it like a mid-range deck, but there's also a good chance you'll have to run it more like a control deck, so be prepared to do that in general. Very generally, you need your power cards. Sawblade Skin Rippers are a good example of this. You can first pick this to be Red-Black Sacrifice, and there's a lot of rares that let you move into this. Then you need your value cards because you have to be sacrificing permanents to do the thing you want to do. So look for the value where you can find it. There's a lot of good places to get it. Then you need things to actually sacrifice. The value is important so that you can sacrifice things that are a little better. But there's lots of things that are built to be sacrificed. And then removal. You have access to removal spells in this deck that only you can play. So you don't have to pick it quite as highly as the other decks. You're the only deck that gets to turn the 1-mana or the 3-mana Threat into a good removal spell. You're the only deck that gets to turn give a creature Death Touch. If you give Sawblade Skin Ripper Death Touch, then sacrifice a permanent, it kills one thing. You can build your own removal spells, so you don't need to take them quite as highly. Thank you so much, the King Columbo. I really appreciate the follow. Sorry you didn't get the normal notification. This is the only content that I make for YouTube from the get-go, so I have some of the notifications off. First black card. Up first, we have Appendage Amalgam. This is a cool one. It's a 3-mana 3/2 flash. Whenever it attacks, surveil 1. No part of this card is good enough alone because being a 3/2 is a liability in a set full of 2/2 manifest dreads. But you can build your deck to take advantage of all the different little aspects of this card. That Surveil is pretty good if you're trying to reanimate. This creature type is pretty good if you're trying to get Delirium. And then this Flash is pretty good if you care about Eerie. This Flash is pretty good if you are holding up mana for a counterspell in your blue-black deck. I'm going to go ahead and raise the floor to a 4. This deck does something in every deck that wants it, but you don't have to pick it that high because ideally you'll be getting those plays elsewhere. It is usually going to feel like a 3 in the black-red deck, but the black-red sacrifice deck wants to fix its draws and often wants to hold mana up anyway. Yeah, it's one of the... You will cut it a lot of the time and not feel bad, but it is a good role player to fill in what you're missing in your deck. Up next, Baelmerk Leech. Very similar to the Amalgam, but slightly more restrictive in... I meant to swap these difficulties. This is a low and a medium. But when this card is good, it's going to feel very powerful. It's not really at home in a Delirium deck. I did literally just switch these 2 cards. Like, I switched these 2 slides. All right, problem solved. This is a 2-mana 2/2, and with Eerie, drain your opponent 1. A 2-mana 2/2 is something that you will often need to play. So getting a little extra value out of it is strong. If we're comparing it to like Wicked Visitor and Wilds of Eldraine, getting this life loss on the front end is much better than getting it on the back end. You get it when the enchantment comes into play, not when the enchantment dies, and you can pull extra life loss out of this card a little bit later. It's going to be just fine most of the time, but it's very good in the Eerie decks, in the dedicated enchantment decks. Cackling Slasher. Death Touch is a very relevant mechanic in this set. You will never be too upset when you play this, but a 4-mana, the Death Touch doesn't matter so much if it's a 4-mana 4/4. If it's a 4-mana 3/3, you'll be glad to have it. It's more like an emergency, but it does its job, and you will almost always wish you had a different 4-drop. Like, it's if you're sacrificing a creature to make this a 4/4, then you're not going to then it's not a 4-drop for you. If you're trading off your creature with your opponent, then you have a 4-mana 4/4, and it's still gonna be fine. Commune with Evil. This card, if it doesn't give you Delirium when you cast it, you built your deck wrong. The Delirium deck wants this very badly. Every other deck is still fine playing it. Like, it's Impulse, Gain for Life, but those cards go into your graveyard. So you want this card in... I'm raising this to a 5. This card's good. You want this card in... This might happen a bit because I was rushed, a little bit rushed. So you want this card in your Reanimator deck. You want this card in your Delirium deck. You don't really care about it in your Sacrifice deck. Like, that's the only place where ideally you'll just have more sack outlets and you can draw those rather than having to use Commune with Evil to dig for it. But tacking gain 3 life onto your draw spell ends up being really strong a lot of the time, because usually you will be losing some tempo when you cast this spell. In this particular set, you are less likely to cast a spell on turn 3 because your opponent will be setting up their engine. But if your removal is good enough, you can take turn 3 off to cast this, and you'll be happy to put 4 cards in your graveyard with 1 card. So when you hit, think it out, because if you hit land, creature, enchantment, sorcery, then you take the sorcery, you put it in your graveyard, and you have Delirium. But if you hit land, creature, you're going to be so happy to draw that creature and put 3 lands in the graveyard that you're not drawing. Like, it's going to feel good to play with. But yes, sometimes you will play this in whiff and it'll feel bad. But then you'll still put 3 cards into your graveyard that you didn't want to draw. Up next, Cracked Skull. This is a good design on this kind of card. So 3 mana Thoughtseize, not quite good enough. And when enchanted creature is dealt damage, not quite good enough. But these effects together combine so that you can make a whole 2 cards out of this. Like, it's a little awkward in that in the late game, so Mind Rot cards in general, cards that make your opponent discard a card, usually you want to play a little early, or you want to time them right. And it's tough to play them in the late game because your opponent might not have cards in them, like cards in hand to take a card with the Cracked Skull. But with Cracked Skull, you're incentivized to play it on a larger creature so that you can trade your 1/1 with it. And they might not have the cards there. This is a set with enough late game decks that you will likely still have a hit, but I want the first copy, and that's usually it. I don't want to play the second copy of this card very often, so I only gave it a 3 with a floor of 3. There are decks that are good at pinging. We'll look at a few creatures that ping really well. If you have your Sawblade Skin Ripper, then the ping from Cracked Skull will kill this. You will get to kill a real creature with 1 damage if you build your deck right. That's why the effort is high. Cynical Loner. 2 mana 3/1 that can't be blocked by Glimmers. So there's 2 sources of 1/1 tokens in this set. They are Glimmers and Gremlins. It can be blocked by Gremlins. It can't be blocked by Glimmers. 2 mana 3/1 is a good attacker. Chances are your opponent will always trade off whatever creature they have for this, making it a not unreasonable removal spell. This is the only black creature at common or uncommon with survival. But picking a card out of your library into your graveyard is really good. Your opponent is very likely going to have to trade with this most of the time. That floor of 4, that's just because it's a 2 mana 3/1 that dodges half of the 1 power creatures. But this card is good in a very aggressive deck or in a more mid-range and combo-oriented deck. You can put your best creature card to your graveyard for a Reanimator deck. That's the ceiling. This is what I'm talking about when I'm saying what's the value I'm getting from my early creatures? This is a powerful enabler for Reanimator, a reasonable card for Sacrifice, a great card for any deck that wants to enable Delirium, and in the decks where it's not inherently good, being able to tuck a Fear of Infinity into your graveyard is a strong early play. And the stats aren't bad. Thanks so much for the follow, Fezzik. I'm doing all the thank yous and such between slides today. Oh no, Fina. Yes, but you're not going to hit land in the artifacts cube because you're going to mill 3 lands in this one. I love this card. Like, the design is cool, is going to play well, and the floor of a 2-mana 3/1 is nice. I like that it doesn't get blocked by glimmers. A lot of the 2-drops make glimmers. You are more likely to trade this. So like a 2-mana 3/1, the downside is often that your opponent just gets to trade off their worst creature for it. But it's a little less likely because of the glimmers. So I raised the if it could be blocked by glimmers, I'd probably have the floor at a 3, but I'd still keep this effort high, ceiling 7, same rating. Up next, Dashing Bloodsucker. You have to be able to trigger Eerie for this card. If you can't trigger Eerie, this card is bad. If you can, this card is fantastic. That's it. That's all there is to it. Like, a 4-mana 4/5 with lifelink, really powerful. 4-mana 2/5 without lifelink, unplayable. We're lowering that floor to a 2. You want to make sure you can trigger Eerie on it. You build your deck to trigger Eerie with this spell. You want to trigger Eerie specifically turn 5, but if you build your deck right, it's going to do a lot of work for you. I can lower that effort value with the floor at a 2. Like, you also don't have to trigger Eerie literally every turn, but there's a lot of good instant speed enchantments available. Like, your opponent, this threat of activation is relevant. Like, if your opponent has a 3/3, if your opponent has 2 3/3s and you have untapped mana, your opponent can't attack you because the risk of you having an enchantment with flash is very high. We'll look at a specific one that I want to talk about shortly. We'll return to this Dashing Bloodsucker when we get there. Ooh, our first black room. This is really cool. One of these tabs is very likely to be relevant. Like, if you pay 5 mana total in 1 turn, then you get a 2/2 and you get to Raise Dead. That's a little weak. It's worse than a regular Gravedigger. I'm lowering the floor to a 3. Sorry, I feel bad that I'm changing so many ratings on the fly. But if you cast this for 4, like, you can cast this for 4 without doing anything else. Like, you don't have to have a target in the graveyard. If you have no cards in your graveyard, you can pay in the 4 mana, and then when a creature dies, you can pay just 1 mana to unlock a room and trigger Eerie. Like, the costs, the way these halves are costed, lets you pay the Eerie. Like, you can play the Dashing Bloodsucker turn 4, turn 5, play the Defiled Crypt to trigger an attack, and then it can just sit there not doing anything until you need this Raise Dead. I like the card a lot, and if you can trigger this a bunch of times, it's going to do a lot of work for you. It's not free or easy to trigger this a bunch of times, but generally, we're assuming that you can trigger it 2, maybe 3 times in a game. That's 7. If you are only playing this at face value at a 5-mana 2/2, that's that floor of a 3. But we're hoping that your black deck is built a little bit better. There's lots of little combos like Fear of Infinity. Fear of Infinity is a very good combo with a Defiled Crypt. Really well made. Yeah, the right side is a Raise Dead by itself, and I'm happy with that. Only triggering once per turn, yes, that sucks. But I think specifically Fear of Infinity is why they added that text. Because if this weren't once per turn, then it would be 4 mana for Defiled Crypt, return a 2/2 to my hand, play a 2/2, discard my 2/2 to draw a card, Raise Dead, make a 2/2, return a 2/2 to my hand. Make a 2/2. All right, our second room in black. There's only 2 rooms, 1 common, 1 uncommon. 3 mana, draw 2, lose 2 life. It's okay. Like, the other half is whenever a creature attacks alone, it gets +1/+0 and gains Death Touch. Attacking alone is something you have to build your deck to do in black, and there's not a ton of creatures that reward you for attacking alone or like that get a ton out of this Death Touch, but there's enough, and we'll talk about them. This is a combo card. Like you need this one doesn't work by itself. It's for decks with specific interactions and specific creatures that you want to give death touch. It is very good in the rooms deck as a splash, and because that deck will struggle a little bit to get some value. Um, but generally, rooms are your late game plays. Like if you are a rooms deck, you're getting your value elsewhere. And black has a lot of good ways to generate value in this format. This isn't a format where you can take turn 3 off to generate value if you're not interacting with what your opponent is doing. And 7 mana is a lot to get to this side, but there are enough combinations with Widow's Walk that it's going to see play in the right deck. Okay, this is true, Theo. I like that point. It's not that good because it doesn't gain lifelink, just death touch. So like because it's just death touch, it's more important to combo with specific creatures, maybe first strikers, or creatures that ping. We'll get to a pinger soon. Fanatic of the Harrowing. It's fine. It's always going to be just fine. If you can recur it or blink it, it gets a little bit better. This is a good enabler for the reanimate deck. It's going to be a 5 in the reanimate deck. It's going to be closer to a 2 in most other decks. And it's solid if you have good things to discard. So like this is a 5 if you have 2 copies of Fear of Infinity. Otherwise, it's always just going to be fine. Like I like this style of card a lot. It's usually fine, but has applications where you can pull a ton of value out of it. I think it's cool. But yeah, it's got to be in the right deck. Correct. That's a very good point, Lion. Your opponent may actively want to discard a card. They may be one away from Delirium, and you might be helping their plan. Yes. Virus Beetle would be really cool in this format, just as an artifact creature, 2-mana artifact creature that does value. Like, I like that you have to want to discard a card. That's what this is. If you don't actively want to discard a card to the Fanatic of Harrowing, you can't play this because the tempo loss of a 4-mana 2/2 is very large. Fear of Lost Teeth. Ooh, hate it. Yes, I like this card. Like, look at all these things it killed. Lots of people fear losing their teeth, I guess. This continued to go up. Like at first, I'm like, well, it doesn't kill a ton of creatures. It kills a few relevant 2-drops. But there's so many little ways to get value out of this guy. It's an enchantment creature. That's 2 pings for Delirium. It's an enchantment creature. That's a ping for all of your eerie triggers. You can give it Death Touch and sacrifice it and it'll kill anything. You can just sacrifice it to kill more things. If you sacrifice it to the Sawblade Skin Ripper, it puts a counter on it and it deals 2 damage to something. If you can give it Death Touch, if you have a cracked skull on your opponent's creature, then you can use it. I do think you want to be able to sacrifice this on demand, but at its floor, it's a 1-mana 1/1 that trades with your opponent's 2/2. Yes, you attack with it with the Widow's Walk. It's a good thing to recur. This is a bread and butter card. You will be actively wanting it in a lot of your decks, and playing it also, like, it's good with Widow's Walk because the Fear of Lost Teeth and a 2-drop are good enough blockers that you can take a turn off to draw 2 cards and pay 2 life. And then the Widow's Walk gives it Death Touch. You can attack with it, give it Death Touch, and sack it. Like, there's a lot of value you can pull out of the Fear of Lost Teeth. It is going to be a really good 1-drop. Okay, so a lot of other content creators think that green is the uncontested best color. Green is just the easiest color, and this punishes green. Green has so many 2/2s that they just manifested that this trades with, then you get to recur it. And if you're green, the green player might have 2 different 2-mana 3/1s, and Fear can trade with one. Like, this just blanks them. You trade with one and kill the other. Good card. I don't think green is the best color. I think green is going to look like the best color week 1. But the ceiling on all the green cards is much, like, the floor on all the green cards is really high, but the ceiling on all the green cards is really low. Like, black has all of these cards with a low floor and a high ceiling. I think black's gonna really perform well. Fear of the Dark. This card is good if your opponent controls no glimmers, really bad if your opponent controls glimmers. I think it's going to perform really well week 1, and then week 2, people are going to catch on to this Glimmer Light, and we're going to start seeing a ton of these Glimmer Lights, and Fear of the Dark is going to get a lot worse. 5 mana, 5/5 is fine, but it doesn't have a huge impact. If it gets to start attacking, your opponent is going to have to trade off 2 real creatures for it. So, okay, I think it's a straight line between this and Scream Puff in Green Black and Woe and Wild Drain. Like, this card is a good finisher. If your black deck has removal and has value, play this at the top of your curve, it'll get the kill. Your opponent won't be able to block it well. Your opponent won't be able to kill it easily. But it's not going to be, it's going to feel good when it's at the top of your curve, but that's not because Fear of the Dark is good. It's because the rest of your deck was good, and you don't have to take it, like, you're not taking this over your removal spell or Raise Dead or value cards. It does take combat tricks really well, and it likes being recurred. Don't run too many copies. I think it's really cool design. I like this card a lot. But like, I think there's also going to be a straight up Pyroclasm deck. There's going to be a red-black deck that plays multiple Pyroclasms, or a Grixis control deck that plays Pyroclasms, and the other sweeper we'll look at soon. And this card is really good in that deck. All right, sorry, scrolling up through the questions. I do think Glimmerlight is good, Theo. Yeah, Glimmerlight just does so many little things. Yes, it can probably still attack through glimmers, but it's not exciting when it does that. Generally, the enchantment creatures that are cheap, enchanted creatures, Appendage Amalgam down, are going to be feeling very good for enabling Delirium. But enchantment creatures at the top end are going to feel a little bit worse because your opponent gets to exile enchantments. When your opponent spends 3 mana to exile your 2-drop, you'll be happy. When your opponent says 3 mana to exile your 5-drop, you'll be upset. Up next, Final Vengeance. This is getting a revisit, but the more I look at black cards, the more it's easy to find things to sack, the more sacrificing is a good thing, and the more exiling is great. This is a format where being able to answer a creature of your choice permanently for 1 mana is going to feel unfair. This is also a format where sacrificing something is a bonus, not a cost. Like, this card is better than Murder in this set in a lot of decks. Not all the time. The floor is a 4. If you don't, it's a 6 easily in the red-black sacrifice deck. In all of the other decks, it's going to play closer to that floor of a 4, but it'll still be a 5. And there's enough little combos that you'll run this anyway. Pack 1, pick 1, I will take Final Vengeance over Murder. If I have a copy of Final Vengeance, I'll take Murder over Final Vengeance, and then probably back and forth after that. Yeah, this is a very good piece of 1 mana removal. Like, this is, we're going to look at a couple cards here in a second, and we'll come back. Given to Violence, combat tricks are not plentiful in this set. There's not that many. Black just doesn't get as much out of them as other cards. It's a really good card with this Fear of the Dark, because your opponent might have to block it. It's a really good card with anything that has Menace, but like comparing to like Scales of Shale or Battle Rage Blessing, it's not actually going to save your creature often enough. It does win you a race, but I don't think this is a set where you're racing damage very often. This is a set where you're racing value. And this card does not help you raise value. You'll still play it. You need some amount of combat tricks in a lot of the decks, but it's going to be one of the weaker ones. All right. This is a card you want to sacrifice. If you play Final Vengeance, sacrificing an Innocuous Rat, you have Delirium and a 2/2 left over. And you get to, like, this common plus this common equals Delirium, manifested creature, exile your opponent's creature. Yes, Innocuous Rat is a 5 because you're happy blocking with it, you're happy sacrificing it. Manifesting Dread just is good. You just want to manifest Dread in most decks, like where you can. Um, Innocuous Rat. Okay, we looked at this one yesterday. I want to talk about Unwanted Remake entirely too much. Like, this card is not unplayable. I'm raising it to a 3. Um, there's so many cards that, like, I'm okay playing Unwanted Remake on my own Innocuous Rat to Manifest Dread 2. Like, Unwanted Remake is a sack outlet. It doesn't say the word sacrifice on it, but it's a sack outlet. Like, Final Vengeance, Innocuous Rat is going to be the core of so many black decks. Innocuous Rat is a good 2-drop. The only place Innocuous Rat is bad is against survival decks. It blocks all of the aggro stuff, but it doesn't stop your opponent from triggering their survival. And you really have to do that if you're the black deck. So you want to try and match your removal to your Innocuous Rats. But I think this is one of the better black commons, and it's going to do a lot of work a lot of the time in this set. I do love my Pokemon shirts. Pokemon Hawaiian shirts. Pokemon stained glass Hawaiian shirts is a look that I like. Also, hi Haiku, I'm glad you made it. Good to see you. Killer's Mask. It's fine. Manifesting Dread is good. 3 mana is a bit much. I don't know how much I care about having the mask left over, and it doesn't stack. So I'll play the first copy, but like the combat tricks in black and the instant speed removal in black aren't quite good enough to justify using a whole card to grant menace. If you need to manifest dread, you can still play it, but this is kind of a cycle. There's a few other cards that manifest dread and are good equipment. Afterwards, we'll talk about them when we get to blue. Yes, this is a Friday the 13th reference. But so yes, this is that's a good point, Theo. So Theo says having this card in your deck to mill is relevant for Delirium. This is true, but this is not the best version of this card. So this isn't a card I'll be upset if I have to play, but it's not a card I'm going to be picking very highly. It has diminishing returns. It has better versions of all the effects of. It has better versions of being an artifact. It has better versions of this effect of manifesting at 3 mana. But the main reason that I have it at a 3 and not a 4 or a 5 is that the combat tricks in black are a little bit weaker. So like generally menace is something that is valuable, because if I attack with my 2/2 menace and you block with your 1/1 and your 2/2, then I can pump my creature to get the kill. But if my 2/2 menace attacks, you're very likely to block with 2 2/2s or a 2/2 and a 2/3, and the combat tricks that I have access to in black aren't enough to turn that into value. They don't add enough power to make this valuable. But if I have those tricks from other colors, this card gets a lot better. So like if I am black-white with the good white combat tricks, then I'll play Killer's Mask. It's not great to be in that position because I want to be doing the reanimation thing. But like the cards this combos with are counter to what the color combinations are wanting to do. Does that make sense? Like, yeah. What menace as a keyword with what this card is all together as a package is counter to what the other decks want to do. So like in black white, we get to use the white combat tricks, but something has gone wrong if I'm using white combat tricks on my 3 mana 2/2 in a black white reanimator deck. That doesn't mean it's unplayable, but it's kind of a trap, right? Like it's a good card on stats, but a bad card in performance. I think that all made sense. Let's play a game. This is a cool card. I love the design of this. It's not a great card, but if you have Delirium and your opponent has small 1-toughness creatures and your opponent has 2 cards in hand and you are pushing damage, this card does a lot. It's a strong sideboard card. This hits enough things enough of the time that you can pull 4 cards. Like with Delirium, you can 4-for-1 with this card. That's incredibly difficult. So there's a high effort value attached. Like I like this card. The in general. Um, but it's not something you can play very high. I think there is a sweepers control deck. Okay, we'll talk about that when we get to the cards that go with it. But I do think that there is a deck with this card and Pyroclasm and Edicts. Um, I don't know what it's going to look like just yet, but I will try to draft it to test it. Yes. So, okay, this is a really good point that I should have talked about earlier, Fina. All right. So, Fina says, if Mask manifests a creature that has Delirium and you can turn it face up and put Menace on it, it's not awful. So, you can count on manifesting a creature, period. Something that can be turned face up. If you play 2 manifest cards, there's a good chance that one of the top 4 cards of your library is a creature that you could then pay the cost to turn it face up later. You can't count on a specific creature. So, this is a really good point, Vina. If you build your deck with enough creatures that gain value from the menace, it's pretty good. Like, ooh, okay. I'm trying to figure out what we've already talked about. If you build your deck with lots of cards like Patched Plaything, like you can build to make this card good. Like that's one of the reasons I think this is going to be such a good set. Black White isn't locked into Reanimator. You can make a pretty cool Black White spells deck with some survival creatures and some eerie triggers. You could make like, but you're going to have to assemble that carefully. Giving your Lionheart Glimmer Menace or your Patched Plaything Menace is really good, but you need to build your deck with a critical mass of creatures that want that you can hit with the Mana Fist. Right. So that's that ceiling of a 5. This card is strong in that deck, but it's got a low initial rating because what the other decks want to do with Killer's Mask isn't that, right? It's an outlier. Very cool. That would be so fun, Haiku. I would play that card. That is a very different card. All right, up next we have Live or Die. Beautiful art, beautiful card, elegant name, incredibly powerful. This is a reanimation card that you can first pick because choose one. Reanimate a creature at instant speed or destroy target creature. And to be clear, this always destroys target creature. If they attacked with a 5/5 and you reanimate your 6/6, you just killed a creature because you can do that at instant speed. You can steal a win by reanimating a big creature on their end step. Like the floor is 5 mana to destroy target creature, not the ceiling. The ceiling is pick up a major threat. Yes, you are like you will play this card in your black red deck. You're not super happy if you're reanimating your Sawblade Skin Ripper. But the fact that this is either a creature that you need at that time, a creature that you are cheating mana on, or destroying a creature that you need to get off the board, is just so powerful. But yeah, everything about this card is cool. Like, this is perfect flavor for a card with this name. And this is not a name that they can use a lot. Like, they only get to use this name one time. Live or Die is, like, that's a name they're cashing in over at Wizards of the Coast. As an aside, one of my favorite things that Mark Rosewater used to write about is the value of a one-word card name, like Murder. Murder is a one-word card name. They only get one shot to make that. That's it. Or Fell out of Bloomborough, elegant. But yes, love this card. Perfect art, perfect flavor. Even the perfect flavor text. Really cool. Love this one. Yes, this will always do what you want it to do. I'll need you to explain that meme. Up next is so this is the highest rated card I have for black. It's a 6 mana 5/4 flyer, and if you like missed a turn or you're flooding out, this turns the game around. Like this is a card that wins games you wouldn't have won otherwise. Uh Discarding 3 cards to kill 3 creatures is going to feel worth it. It enables Delirium. It's a reanimation target. You are happy to have this at the top of your curve. It's a little awkward if you top deck it, but it's still a 5/4 flyer. Like, this is a creature that turns the game around and ends the game in 4 turns. It is the strongest card in black that I have seen, including the rares. I haven't seen all the rares, but even including the rares that I've seen, it is stronger. This is a first pick black card. Right. You can, like, this is you can looking at Black White Reanimator, if you Rite of the Moth this, you also get to discard the card that you flashed this back for. You cannot target the same creature twice. Haiku, the VOD will go up at the end of this. The YouTube video will be up either very late tonight or very early tomorrow morning. And tomorrow we're doing early access. Tomorrow is the streamer event. I will be drafting this set all day to test these theories, and that way I can revise stuff before we post this tier list for the first time. Yes, it can't target the same creature twice, but your worst case scenario is often kill 2 creatures and trade with a creature. It does struggle against some of the decks that play gigantic creatures, but there aren't bigger flyers than this. Add common or uncommon. Like, if we go, I do want to check this. I did it before, but Oracle, rarity common or rarity uncommon, and then Oracle flying or Oracle reach, then type creature. Fear of Abduction is the same size, and your opponent does not want to blink it. Shepherding Spirits trades with it, but there's no, like, 6/6 flyers, right? There's no 6/6 wall of a reach creature. Like, this is the biggest thing in the air. It's not literally the biggest, but it trades with the ones that are slightly larger. Yep, this is such a cool card. All right, up next, Murder. I still love Murder as a card. Like, 3 mana, destroy entire creature, instant speed. Elegant, good use of a single word. Like, I read Mark Rosewater's article years ago about how they were like, well, Dark, we are always, like, you don't want Murder to be a 4 mana spell that you then can't play, you can't ever print again. You wasted that name. But yes, it's great. Yes, the floor and the ceiling is the same. Murder will always kill a creature. Effort, none. This is an important card metric for using my system in general. Like, Live or Die is technically not always going to be better than Murder, but it's always going to feel better than Murder. But if we look at, like, Final Vengeance, exiling a creature is usually going to feel better than Murder, but sometimes it's going to be worse than Murder because Murder is an instant speed and you don't have to have anything else in play. Like, Murder's always going to be fine. The only time Murder ever wasn't, like, a 0 effort card was MKM because so many of the creatures had Ward. But yes, it's just going to be good for your deck if you're black. You do have to be black because it's black. There have been sets where, like, you want to be a 3-color set and black isn't free. But for the most part, Murder is going to be a 5 with 0 effort. Ooh, I love. Okay, so Nowhere to Run is an important card you have to know about this card this set. Like, Ward is worse in this set. Hexproof is worse in this set. There's no Shroud, but this is a 2 mana target creature gets -3/-3, but it's also an enchantment with Flash. Like, this is a way to trigger Flash at instant speed. Like, this is a 2 mana removal spell that leaves something behind to sacrifice with Final Vengeance. It's a 2 mana removal spell that lets you trigger Dashing Bloodsucker on your opponent's turn. If your opponent has 2/3/3s and you have Dashing Bloodsucker and 2 mana up, they can't attack ever. Like, instant speed, eerie trigger that leaves an enchantment behind to sacrifice is so good. Incidentally, all the things in this set sacrifice creatures or enchantments. You can't sacrifice Killer's Mask. But yes, Relevant typing, relevant body, relevant card that gets left behind, instant speed, eerie trigger. It's 2 mana to shrink a creature is just a good spell on its own. I'm raising this. I think this is a 7. Yeah, because I'm splashing this. I'm building around this. Yeah, this is a 7. It feels weird making it the same score as the Miasma Demon, but like the floor is lower. It's usually gonna play near the ceiling. This is true, Fina. This is true. Yes, this is a really good removal spell. Because it's better than it's comparable to Scorching Dragonfire. We'll talk about Scorching Dragonfire. This is a 6 or a 7. It kills 65% of the creatures in the format. Which is not everything, but it lets you win combat. So it does end up killing more than that. Yeah, but like you can play this, kill a creature, sacrifice it to Final Vengeance, and then you'll have an enchantment and a sorcery in your grave. All right, up next, Osseous Stick Twister, 2 mana 2/2 lifelink. That is an artifact and a creature that has delirium, that feeds delirium, that just slowly drains your opponent out. This card is always going to be good for you. It's always powerful. This might just be a 5 though, because you need delirium for this to be good. I'm lowering it to a 5 and I'm raising the effort to a medium. Dang, I didn't expect to be changing. So I did black first when I did all the cards because it's in the middle, and now I'm just changing all the stuff. But yes, this is a good card, and it's usually going to play near that floor of a 5, which is a 2/2 lifelink that eventually turns on. But if you turn this on turn 3, your opponent's going to feel it. Gaining 4 life a turn is so much, and they're not going to want to sack a permanent usually. They might want to discard a card. But the reason that I just lowered it is that sometimes they're going to want to get a land into their graveyard by sacrificing a land, and sometimes they're going to have extra permanents to around, and sometimes they're going to actively want to sacrifice permanents. So it's not always the best late game top deck. But a 2 mana 2/2 lifelink with 2 types is good in this format. Oh, okay. So yes, this is a good question. So it's not really good question, Ben. So Ben says so it can't target a hexproof creature or a ward creature, is what his question was. It can target them because this first ability is a trigger. You have to choose targets when the trigger goes on the stack, or when the ability is cast, or when the spell is cast. So because this is a triggered ability, this comes into play first, and then you choose targets, and then the ability resolves. But when you are choosing the targets, this is a state-based continuous effect. State-based effects happen first. So this will already be in effect when you have to select your target. Good question, Ben. This can target creatures with hexproof and ward, and very importantly in this set, your opponent can't defend it against it with something like a Shard Mage's Rescue. They can if it makes it bigger, but what a lot of the decks want to do in this format is put down a Gremlin Tamer and then keep up protection for it for the rest of the game. But they don't get to protect their Gremlin Tamer through a Nowhere to Run. Very good question. Yep. You can even pull additional value out of this if your opponent has something like that. This is going to be really good question, Theo. So Theo says, I wonder how close this will be to a 3-color set. It's not going to be a 3-color set, but splashes will happen a lot. A lot of cards get incidental value from an additional extra thing, but they don't. But there's a lot of looting. So there's a lot of ways to get rid of the extra cards that you can't cast. Splashing is low risk. Running a 3-color deck is high risk, but splashing a card is very low risk. You're more likely to splash Nowhere to Run in your blue-white deck than run an Esper deck, Theo. That makes sense? That tracks. I don't know. It happens kind of a lot. It's the difference between running 2 black cards and running 6 black cards. Hans was like that though, because you would play your morphs and then you would end up flipping your morphs up later. So It's also that your fixing is less likely to be catch-all fixing. Your fixing is more likely to be specific. Like you'll pick up a black-white dual land and splash where you can. But like you're okay, actually Theo, you're right in that you'll play the morphs and cons because you didn't have to worry about flipping them up until a lot later. And that's kind of what this set's going to be like. You will play Nowhere to Run because you'll either cast it really late, or you don't have like you can discard it. Blue has a lot of looters, red has a lot of looters. Up next, we've got popular egotists. I always thought it was egoist. Popular. That's because Blue Lock ruined me. Blue Lock made me think that egoist was a word. 3 mana, 3/2, gains indestructible. It self protects. And whenever you sacrifice a permanent, target opponent loses 1 life. You gain 1 life. It's a strong finisher in black red. It's a 7 in black red. It's a 5 most other places, and it's going to be a 4 in a lot of the reanimator decks because you won't have spare permanents. But like you're always happy to play this when you have spare permanents. Yes, it does have to be an actual sacrifice, which is why you want it to be an actual black red. But you can like, you know what this combos with? Unwanted remake. You can make it indestructible and then unwanted remake your egotist. This is a cool card. Yes, it's hard to kill and it's a good win condition. I'm gonna be in black red a lot. Black red sacrifice looks like so much fun. So I gave it a 5. It's usually gonna play near that 5. It's a 7 in black red. Resurrected Cultist. This card is cool. This is a late game value card for your dedicated Delirium decks. You don't need to take it too high, but you're not going to be upset when you have to play it. Like, it's a 3 mana 4/1 and a 4 mana 4/1. You're okay looting it or surveilling it, milling it out. It's cool. This is a really cool card, but it's the kind of thing that you wheel. If you're the Delirium deck, you go for your Delirium stuff first, and then you pick this up last pick, and you get to play it anyway. Be prepared to side it out in best of 3. There's a lot, like, trading this for 2 Glimmers or 2 Gremlins isn't worth it. You want to use this on defense more than offense, because you want to have control over what it trades with. So, like, this is for your more defensive speed decks. It's better in, like, black-white or black-green. And you can sack it twice in black red, but it's always going to be kind of one of the worst versions of what you want. Up next, Spectral Snatcher. Great reanimation target. You can swamp cycle, and your opponent has to get rid of 2 cards to pick it to get rid of it. So it's great in black white, and it's okay in blue black. It's a 6 in black white. It's a 5 in blue black. It's a 4 in green black or red black. I actually don't want this at all in red black, so I'm lowering the floor to a 3. But in green black, it's still fine for triggering Delirium. It's a cool card, and it's a great reanimation spell. Good point, Ben. It is not a Warlock. Yes, this is a significant ward cost. But when you play 6 mana for your 6/5, your opponent can't kill with a spell, but they are very likely to be able to trade with it. That's why it's so good in Reanimator. Like, if you reanimate this, your opponent has to 2-for-1 themselves to kill it. But if you cast it, your opponent is very likely to be able to trade their creature with it. And so it's just going to be a 1-for-1. Sporogenic Infection. This is a cool card that takes some work. So if your opponent has we're gonna lay out the scenarios here. If your opponent has 2 1/1s, this card is bad. If your opponent has a 1/1 and a 4/4 and nothing else, this card is fine. You get to kill your opponent's 4/4 for 2 mana. It's an edict. If your opponent has exactly 2 4/4s, this card is nuts, because then you get to kill the more important 4/4 and trade your 1/1 or your ping for the other 4/4. This is a high effort card. It's part of a Pyroclasm deck. If you have Pyroclasm, this card gets a lot better, because you can Pyroclasm pre-playing the infection, and then your opponent won't have small creatures to sacrifice, and you can play it post-Pyroclasm, or you can play Pyroclasm after the infection to kill other creatures, and the relevant thing here, you will not always get to kill what you want with it. This is hard to play with. It is hard to build with. It is really cool. And you can't ever kill your Oh, so you can just play this as an edict. So we have seen cards like like Mutiny and Ixalan or Enchant Creature. It's not enchant opponent's creature. You don't have to put it on your opponent's 1/1 to kill their 6/6. You can, if your opponent only has one creature in play, you can play it on your own creature in order to kill your opponent's creature. So like that's the fail case of Sporogenic Infection. It's often better than a straight edict. But it also triggers Eerie. A really cool card with great design. It's got a high effort value because you have to think about how you're playing with this, and you have to think about how you're playing your game when this is in your deck. But really excellent design. Yeah, cool card. Like when your opponent has two really good creatures and nothing else, then this will pull you back into the game. So this is when you're ahead or when the game is pretty even, this card will be fantastic. When you're losing by a lot, it's not going to help very much. Sorry, you get a weaker laugh because of YouTube content. All right, Valvagoth's Faithful, just a good card. So 1 mana, 1/1. This is the reanimation spell you want. This is true. You can play it on your own creature and then sack your own creature in a pinch. Good point, Fezzik. I like it. Valvagoth's Faithful. 1 mana, 1/1. That is a Zombify later. That's really good. But this is a 1 mana, 1/1 that is a Zombify later that you can recur. Like, this is a 1 mana, 1/1 that is a reanimation spell for your black-white deck. But you can also pick it up with things that return target creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to play. It lets you jump up the chain. It doesn't return it with a finality counter also, which is relevant. This is a good card in general. It's going to be a 4 in most decks. It's going to be a 6 in your black-white reanimator deck. But it's also a 6 in decks that just like you don't have to be black-white reanimator. You can just play this with your swamp cycling creature and be happy. Really cool. I feel like it's just the right amount of finality. Yes, turn your Unearth into a Rise Again. Thank you, March. Yes, 4 in a lot of decks, 5 with the right cards, 6 in Black-White Reanimator. Medium effort. All right, Vile Mutilator. This card is not something you want to cast. This is a pure reanimation target. It is a 7 in the Black-White Reanimation deck. It is a 5 in your blue-black control deck. You'll have things to sacrifice in that deck. It's a 4 or a 3 in your red-black sacrifice deck. I know that seems like it should be where it goes. But taking out a token and a non-token is really good value, and it's a huge body. If you can get to the point where this is castable, it gets a lot better. Like, this is fine if you're ramping to it in your green-black deck, but you obviously want to be reanimating it most of the time. Red-black struggles to get to 7 mana is the problem. Like, green-black will get to 7 mana, blue-black will get to 7 mana. Black-white can get to 7 mana. Red-black really struggles to get to 7 mana because it's so efficient. Like, okay, red-black doesn't struggle to get to 7 mana because it's running fewer lands. Red-black struggles to get to 7 mana for a lot of reasons we're going to talk about when we get to red, and they all involve looting. Like, red-black gets to sacrifice lands to draw cards, and they get to rummage a lot. So chances are red-black stops playing lands after the 5th land. That does mean that red-black, you might be right, because red-black just gets to play Valvagoth's Faithful and Vile Mutilator and then rummage. There's a lot of rummage available in the set and looting. All right, up next, Winter's Intervention. It's fine. It's good anti-aggro. The thing is, this doesn't even kill all of the 2-drops. Like, for 2 mana, I'm lowering this. Like, it's fine. It kills things. But it doesn't kill the things you have to kill. There are so many multicolored and blue cards that you have to kill on turn 2 with your 2 mana spell. Like, if you have Winter's Intervention in your hand as your staying alive spell, and your opponent's 2-drop is Oblivious Bookworm, you're gonna lose, and it's gonna feel awful. Or if you spend 2 mana to gain 2 life and kill your opponent's manifested creature from their 2-drop, it's gonna feel really bad. Like, this doesn't kill enough of what it needs to. 2 damage is not as good as it is in other sets. Like, Bookworm is dumb, but we're going to see some really crazy 3 toughness 2-drops in a minute here, Theo. Yeah. Like, it's a good thing to have access to, but the 2 mana removal spells are so good in this set. Like, comparing Winter's Intervention to Nowhere to Run feels really bad. All right. Finally, in black, we have Withering Torment. It kills anything. You lose 2 life is a cost. It is. But killing anything is great. And if you aren't black, green, or black, white, if you are blue, black, or red, black, this is your only way to kill enchantments. And you need to kill enchantments a fair amount of the time. Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, also Scorching Dragonfire and the green bite and the white 2 mana destroy target tapped creature. Like, the competition this card has is crazy. And you'll play it when you don't have other removal, but it's gonna feel so bad when you don't have the other removal. Like, if you don't have Scorching Dragonfire or a 2 mana bite or a 2 mana destroy target tapped creature or a murder or a Withering Torment, or the Sporogenic Edict or the Liver Die, or even like a 2 mana +2/+2 and lifelink, or a deck that can take advantage of Final Vengeance or a Threaten and a Sacrifice or a Bounce Manifest, or at least 6 other things on that list, then Winter's Intervention is going to feel really silly. When you get the kill with it, it's going to feel great. So this is a conscious departure from the color pie, Theo. Like, well, no, that's not true. Theo, either this is a conscious departure from the color pie, or fuck you, Wizards. And I'm gonna choose to believe. I mean, or it's too late. I said fuck you, Wizards. Either I'm going to choose to believe this is a conscious departure from the color pie because I'm in an optimistic mood. But I'm okay with black killing just enchantments. I'm okay with red killing just artifacts. I like that. um, I'm also okay with killing an enchantment for black always having a life cost attached. I like it. I think it's cool. Um, yeah, there we go. Thank you, Kaiser. But as long as this is conscious, I'm happy. I was really mad with Raven form and Cowdime. I know that was a long time ago, and this is an obscure complaint. Um, but I like this. Like, Feed the Swarm is cool. I like Withering Torment. This is a good 3 mana, lose 2 life, destroy an enchantment. When white gets to do it for 1 mana and green gets to do it for 1 mana, is reasonable. I'm okay with it. All right. Let's pick the next color. I need a short break to refill my water and maybe have a cup of tea if I'm going to last and just rest my voice. But I'll let people vote on the next color. So on this scale, on the Graveyard to Enchantment scale, we have done white and black, just for general. We're going to take a 3-minute break. We're going to take a 1-song break to decide the next color, green, red, or blue. Go ahead and vote. I'll be back in 3 minutes. See you soon. You're going to deal with a blank screen for a minute so that I know where to cut. I think the survival mechanic came together pretty well. All right, wait, what one? Why don't I get to check what one? There's not even like a poll ended notification. What color are we doing? Next color poll ended, but it doesn't tell me which color one. My teacup. Someone tell me what color one. I love this teacup. It's very clearly labeled. All right, here we go. Have I really been 47 seasons? Can somebody tell me what color one? If nobody can, then we'll do blue. We can do green. Green is a doozy, and I think it does give some context. All right, we'll do green next. I thought I had the mod view. But we're just going to do green. It's fine. All right, so first up, we have blue-green manifest. You might notice that Oblivious Bookworm is very silly. Where's the chat? There's a chat. Okay. You might notice that Oblivious Bookworm is silly. Blue-green manifest. So blue cares about enchantments the most. Green cares about graveyards the most. And because those two things kind of lack synergy, there are 0 Eerie cards in green. There are zero Delirium cards in blue. They gave them the strongest mechanic to unite them. In general, you need your payoffs first. Those are cards like Oblivious Bookworm, or cards, we'll look at a lot of them in green today, cards that just care about manifesting cards. So payoffs first, then you need your removal spells. There's not a lot of removal, so you have to pick it pretty high. Then the cards that actually manifest dread, and then your focus. You have to figure out how you're winning. Are you trying to flip things up and overwhelm them? Are you trying to just have more value? Are you trying to lock down the game? Or are you splashing your win condition? Figure out what your focus is. And like, if I'm not, you don't need to manifest on turn 2 if you have a ton of Oblivious Bookworms and other 2-drops that generate value. So you can focus your manifesting later. Your value is not something you need to spend picks on. It just comes. You'll just have value. Oblivious Bookworm draws an extra card every turn. So many of your cards just generate value when the creatures comes into play. And then figure out how you're going to win. It's okay if you need to splash. This is a really good color combination for splashing. Green-white survival. So first you need to choose your value survivors, then your combat tricks. You can take combat tricks really high. The green and white ones are good, and you need a lot of them. Then the other survivors. So like, the survivors that draw cards or get you lands are more important. Wait, this is green, yeah. The combat tricks are, you want white combat tricks more than green ones. There's just not that many in the set. Then you can find the ones that just grow your creatures or make your attacks easier, like Shoot Storyteller. And then power. You need powerful cards to dig for and to close things out. And that can be anthems that let you attack or make it so that things keep hitting. You want to find what the purpose of your engine. First, you just enable your attacks. You can substitute combat checks for removal and focus on the size of your creatures after that. This is literal power also. Green-black Delirium, we talked about this one already, but you want to do your curve plays, then find your removal, then figure out your late game, and then find out where your card advantages come. Figure out your plan for getting Delirium, and figure out what you need to splash, or if you need to splash, and then figure out how badly you actually need to ramp. Green-black doesn't get a lot out of ramp. They just want to play all their cards every turn. Spider. I'm sorry, Theo. I need to show you the ceiling before I can show you the floor. All right, and finally, red-green Delirium aggro. So green-black is more like Delirium value, control, and grind. Red-green is more Delirium kill them dead. You need your power first, then your removal spells. You have to figure out what kind of removal you're getting. Like red gets access to a lot of removal spells that only are good when you have Delirium. And green gets access to removal spells that tend to require you have creatures already. And then finally pump spells, but there's one pump spell in red that you need to pick higher than all of the others. And we'll talk about it later. Figure out your plan for Delirium. So red green has 2 avenues for Delirium. They can they can come by it naturally. You can play an instant, attack with Wildfire Wickerfolk, and manifest a land into your graveyard. It'll happen naturally over time. Or you can spend specific spells. You can't spend more than 1 turn. If you take 1 turn off for Delirium on that plan, like you have to get it in that spell. If you're taking a turn off of your 2-drop to play Say My Name, that's the only turn you can take for that. Like you have to be playing creatures every other turn. But if it's consistent enough, like if you're doing it fast enough, it's worth it. If you take turn 2 to enable Delirium and then have it for the rest of the game, that's worth it. Figure out how you're forcing your attackers through. You can do that with enough removal. You can do that with pump spells. You can do that with natural size. If you play the Wicker Folk on turn 2 and then take turn 3 off to have Delirium, that's attacking through most of the 2-drops your opponent could have just played. And then figure out what your kill is. You can do that with a pile of pump spells, or you can do that with a pile of creatures. Or burn. You can actually burn your opponent out in this format. I don't think Boros is very strong. I think Simic is the strongest. I think black-white has the highest ceiling. I think Reanimator has the most potential. Which is cool that I think the top 2 decks are going to be totally separated on colors. Black-white and blue-green. I also think there's like a 5-color rune deck. Oh my god, that's good tea. Need that. Okay. In general, green's cards are the strongest average, right? But they tend to have lower ceilings and they tend to have less synergy built in. So like green just has a lot of raw power, but if your deck is failing, you can move into green and you'll be okay. But they don't have access to quite the same engines that other colors do. All right, up first, Altenac the Thrice Called, one of the coolest cards in the set, for a reason that we'll look at the end, called Say My Name. But 7 mana, 9/9. Like if your opponent kills this, murders this right away, and you draw a card, you get some value out of it, but it's still going to hurt. But it's fine still. Like it's not. So the Cactarantula is a card that was very powerful in Outlaws Thunder Junction because you usually paid 5 mana for it, and you could ramp into it, and then if your opponent killed it, you were up a card. That's not the same at 7 mana. At 7 mana, if all you do is play a 7 mana 9/9 trample and your opponent murders it, it's going to feel bad even with your card. Which is why the ceiling's not higher. This is also not a format where getting to 7 mana is a free thing. But you are very likely to be able to return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. You should plan to use this ability where you can. You also don't need the second copy of this card very often. Really cool design, and I liked it a lot. Hey, Elf. I'm having a great day. This set looks really cool, and even with the flavors not there for everything, the mechanics are. It's going to play really well. You might really like this set, Elf. Like, it's a big departure from the cutesy Bloom Barrel, but the horror theme's working for a lot of stuff. Right, this is a solid Abs and Reanimator card. And it combos with a card that we will look at very shortly. Yep. It's going to be pretty cool. Everybody should check out Distracted Elf. They're a pretty cool streamer. I really enjoyed their new model. But we do... I answer things between slides here. That's how we do the set review. All right, up next, we've got Anthropede. 4 mana, 3/4 reach is okay. If you need reach, you can play it. But generally, the ability isn't going to be terribly useful because you're still paying... You're either playing a 6 mana 3/4 or you're paying 2. Most rooms, not all rooms, but most rooms have the initial effect that you care the most about stopping when they come into play. So Anthropede does get to kill the room after it's done the thing. That doesn't mean there aren't rare rooms that you really need to kill, or late game rooms that are taking the game over. It's a valuable sideboard card to have access to, whether you're splashing, especially at your pre-release. You should check your card pool for an Anthropede, because your opponent is going to have access to cards that you may really need to play the Anthropede against. You will also occasionally need it if you're low on removal, because the flyers are quite good in this set. And there's a lot of them, most of them are 2/2s and 3/3. So Anthropede is a nice problem solver. but generally it's not something you should pick very high or put too much effort into getting. Up next, we've got Bashful Beastie. Before I start, love this art. Like, it's so creepy. It's clearly walking on 4 legs, but it's adjusting its mask with this hand. um, the problem with Bashful Beastie, in any other set of 5 mana 5/4 that milled 1 and manifested Dread, made a 2/2 on death, would be quite strong. But 4 toughness is a liability in this set, and a lot of the removal that your opponent has access to on turn 5 actually exiles it. Or disables it. So it ends up being weaker than it would be otherwise. Because generally you want your 5-drops to produce some value on the way in or the way out. But it's still fine. Like, the card is fine. Don't be upset if you have to play it. It's that ceiling of a 5, that's if you can sack it on demand. If you have access to good sacrifice outlets for this Bashful Beastie, it gets a lot better. But you don't want to use your 5 mana plays to enable your Delirium. You want your 5 mana plays to benefit from your Delirium, or to benefit from the other payoffs you have. Like, it does make you a manifested creature, which is important to a lot of decks, and it does put a card in your graveyard, which is important to a lot of decks, but you don't want your 5-drops to do that, and we'll look at a lot of 5-drops that showcase this. So I gave it a floor with a floor of a 3. It's going to be a 3 if you aren't actively interested in manifesting, and it's still a 5 in that blue-green manifest. All right, up next we have Break Down the Door. This card is like Pop Hash formation in the last set. The one of these modes will always be something that you want. Manifesting Dread at instant speed is a lot like dealing 2 damage to a creature, but you get to manifest Dread and put a card into your graveyard. So like, this exiles a problematic card, something you can't deal with, but if your opponent isn't a deck that has those cards, you get to manifest Dread. Like, it's the fail case of this card is still very strong. I gave it a 5 with a ceiling of a 5. It'll usually play at that ceiling. We had an interesting conversation in Discord earlier about this card, and then I was informed that this character is Tamio's son and not lover. But this card does not do what you want it to do. If you're controlling enough that shuffling 4 cards from your library graveyard into your library is good for you, then it's fine. This is part of a hard control deck, but you don't often end up in a hard control deck for a red-green or for a blue-green manifest. However, there are situations where you're going to run out of cards. If you're playing all of the cards that you are, a pair of these keeps you from decking. If you are the kind of deck that is struggling to find a win condition and is just locking down the game, controlling things, then 2 of these is not an unreasonable way to stop yourself from dying. You have to target your opponent's cards. So you can't... It's the owner of target artifact or enchantment and opponent controls shuffles it into their library. You may shuffle up to 4 target cards from your graveyard into your library. That means you don't have to have cards in your graveyard, but you do have to have an artifact or enchantment your opponent controls on the other side of the board. If your opponent suspects that you are using Cathartic Parting to stop yourself from milling out, they can stop playing artifacts and enchantments. So it's a sideboard card. It's a good sideboard card. It's good to have access to in best of 3. It's really good against the Eerie decks. It's bad everywhere else. Card's fine. It's a 4 mana 4/4. It will gain you some life some of the time. If it starts attacking, it's going to feel really good. But like, it's a 4 mana 4/4. It does what you want it to do. Guy's Blessing would be way too good in this format. All right, up next, Coordinated Clobbering, our first removal spell in green. Interestingly, for a red card we will look out, this doesn't say target creature deals damage to target creature and opponent controls. You tap creatures as part of you tap your creatures, and then they deal the damage. That means that if a card happens to say, change the target instant or sorcery with a single target, you can still do that. But tapping your creatures is a huge cost. Like, if you have a 4/4 and a 5/5, and you need to deal 9 damage, that means you don't get to use this to clear the way for your attackers. That means that in order to make this card actually good, you need creatures with survival. If you tap your Cautious Survivor and you get to gain 2 life, that's going to feel a lot better. This is a card for survival. It is a removal spell that you will play when you have to, but it doesn't do what you want it to do unless you are triggering survival. Right. That's exactly right, Fezzik. This is a super survival enabler. But like, it's only 1 mana. 1 mana kill spells are good. But let's compare it to murder. If your opponent has a 5/5 and you have a 3/3 and a 2/2 with survival, then murdering the 5/5 on your opponent's side of the board triggers the survival and deals 5 damage to your opponent. This one just deals 5 damage to the creature and triggers survival. So it's fine. But it's just fine. It gave it a 4 with a floor of a 3. If you are a really dedicated survival deck and you have to trigger those survival triggers, then this card is good. But this interaction, this is why I think that survival is less of an aggressive deck than a tempo and a mid-range deck. Like a deck where you're putting effort into enabling your survival. Up next, Cryptid Inspector. This card is really good when it's a 3/4 or a 4/5 or a 5/6. Having Vigilance is great. This is part of the. This is a 6 in a deck that's manifesting Dread. However, you can manifest Dread in green alone. You don't need other colors. So if you're playing green, you're going to play this and it'll be a 4 for you. And it's going to be a 5 anywhere in between. It scales up directly with how much manifest Dread you have until it's a 4/5. If this is a 3 mana 4/5, that's a 6. Cool. I like this one. Yeah, 5, 4, 6, medium effort, cool card. Love the flavor on it. Oh, the vigilance is relevant. There's not a lot of cards with vigilance. This having vigilance is relevant because of coordinated clobbering. All right, up next, Defiant Survivor. Really good in a survival deck if you are putting effort into triggering survival. If you just are attacking and have good triggers, you're pretty happy growing it. This should be a 6. Because it's so good in the survival deck and in the manifest deck. I agree with you, Theo. But yeah, just solid. It usually does what you want it to do. It's good if you're killing creatures. It's good if you're manifesting Dread. It's kind of good everywhere. I'm also raising the floor. Yeah, this is so. When I was saying yesterday, when we were talking about white, I was talking about the difference between survival that is a nice something extra and survival that is actual value. A lot of like this one that manifests Dread when it survives, the white one that draws a card when it survives, even the green white one that puts a counter on a creature when it survives, those are the survival creatures that you need. So when we're talking about the pick order of your survival cards, you need the value survivors first. These are the important cards for your survival deck. You have to have these for your survival deck to work. And it's a good one. All right, up next, this card is pretty much a pure survival enabler. Like, 5 mana for a 5/4 trample is bad. 4 mana for a 5/4 trample is reasonable because it's got those multiple creature types. 3 mana for a 5/4 trample that enables your survival is great. This is a 7 in the survival deck. This is a 6 or a 5 if you have a few extra creatures lying around that you don't want to attack with. We should probably raise. Nah, it's fine. You don't want to be paying 5 mana for your enchantment creature that your opponent can hit. But this is really good in the survival deck for a few reasons. First off, it triggers the survival. Second off, white is pretty good at returning creatures with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. You have a surgical suite that does it, and you have a survivor that does it. So this is a 3 mana 5/4 that can get picked up by both of those spells. Yes, this is a 5 mana 5/4. If you're convoking this, it's not going to feel great unless you get value out of the creature surviving. But like this is a card that you mostly only want in survival, which is cool. I love it. This one got a big bump. It's the only cheap death touch creature in the whole set. And this is a set that really wants a cheap death touch creature. So like this text is useful for turning survival on. But the thing is, your opponent will trade any creature for your Defiant Survivor. It doesn't matter that you give it Death Touch. But this has lots of little combos that you'll be able to find. There's little pingers. If you give your pinger Death Touch, then it gets to attack, and then you get to sacrifice your 1/1. It's called the Fear of Lost Teeth. If you turn 1 Fear of Lost Teeth, turn 2 Flesh Burrow is very likely to make their blocks difficult and kill a creature. It kind of enables survival, and it recurs. Cheap death touch creatures. So we see this a lot. Like the You can evaluate a set in part by how good the 1-mana 1/1 Death Touch creature is. If there's a lot of recursion, that 1-mana 1/1 Death Touch does a lot of work. This is a set with a lot of recursion, but without any 1-mana 1/1 Death Touch creatures. So a 2-mana 2/2 Death Touch is as close as we get. This is going to feel very strong as a 2-mana 2/2 that discourages survival, enables survival, and that you're happy to recur. Yeah, that's accurate. I like the Spider in Lord of the Rings because being able to block your opponent's 1/1 army or slay their 10/10 army is awesome. Also, the flavor of that spider was so cool because, like, your opponent has an army of 100 orcs. You drop one spider in one orc boot, and they're done. Frantic Strength. Good trick for a survival deck. Okay trick for triggering Eerie, but green doesn't care about triggering Eerie. And it's nice that it leaves something behind. This is a 5 in a deck that has some Eerie cards or some survival cards. It's a 5 in green-white specifically, but it's pretty weak just about everywhere else. I wouldn't play this in black-green happily unless I needed a win condition. Like, this is a way to give trample to a late-game card, like a late-game way to win. But yeah, really good in green-white and kind of weak everywhere else. Grasping Longneck. This one's getting a revisit, but I don't think aggro will feel like a thing, but that's because their creatures are growing every attack, not because they're actually burning you out. Your life total does not matter in the same way it would in other aggressive sets because the engines people build are going to matter more. It's still playable. It's a defensive 4/2 enchantment creature. It's 2 things for Delirium, yes, and it blocks flyers. It'll usually kill a flyer, but like, it's fine. It's usually just going to be fine. It's not something you want to play. There's nothing that cares about this being a 4/2, and I don't like it when my 3 drops trade with manifested creatures. Right. So that hit the nail on the head, Theo. So Theo says he does. It's good for Delirium, but he doesn't think you need it. Green doesn't need a lot of help triggering Delirium. There are really powerful ways to trigger Delirium. Green is one of the best colors for triggering Delirium. Grasping Longneck is not it. All right. This card is part of a 5-color Rooms deck, which I think is good. I think there is going to be an actively very powerful 5-color Rooms deck. Don't play it anywhere else. There's a 5-mana, 5-color Room Lord that I will play this card in. There is a 5-color deck and 5-color themed cards. I think that deck's good. I think it's not just good, but great. This is the only deck that wants this. Like, this card isn't good for fixing. This card isn't good for enabling Delirium or card advantage. Like, you need to really just want this to be a room and want 5 colors. And I am so excited to play that deck. No, Theo, I'm doing that day 1. If I open that rare, hang on, I'll pull it up. Rarity. Oracle. It's a 5-color card. I'm pulling it up because I want to talk about it a little bit. Marina Vendrell. ETB, reveal the top 7 cards of your library. Put all enchantment cards from among them into your hand and the rest in the bottom of your library in any order. Lock or unlock the door of target room you control. If I see this in early access tomorrow, I'm first picking it and we're playing 5-color rooms. Full stop. Yes, but the rooms generate so much value. Like, you can also just use it to get more rooms. I am playing Marina Vendrell tomorrow if I see it. I am glad they gave us an uncommon that nobody wants that works with that deck. Really excited about it. I am lowering the floor to a 1 because you honestly shouldn't play this. But I'm so excited to play this. Giving it a note. All right. Horde Vigor. This card is good because combat tricks are good, Indestructible is good, and Death Touch is good. It's better than it would be in most sets. In most other sets, this would cost 1 mana. But, like, it's just a good trick. You want it in your survival deck. You don't want it in your Delirium deck. But there are enough creatures, there are enough archetypes that really value keeping a specific creature alive for a specific amount of time that you will still play this card in those decks. You just want to have those cards first. Make sure you know what value you're getting out of this. Like, if this is 2 mana, kill your opponent's creature, Manifest Dread is great, but you don't want to. It's not worth it for keeping a grasping long neck alive. House Cartographer, 2 mana 2/2 survival. Draw a card. That's what it does. Like you draw a land card, but you want those lands. You draw the card. This card is really good for the survival deck. Gibbon, good to see ya. Yeah, so I gave it a 6 average, and it's usually going to play like a 6. The thing is, you don't have to be a dedicated survival deck for this to be good. You can play this on turn 2, attack on turn 3, draw your land once, and you're happy. So that's a 5. In the dedicated survival deck, that's a 7. But you want to put some work into it. Like, cool card. This is the cheapest value survival creature. Like, this is the cheapest survival creature that generates a card's worth of value. Next, Insidious Fungus. Puts a creature in your graveyard. Cycles if you have to. But destroying an artifact or an enchantment is great. Like, this is just a good green card that you want to play if you're green. I gave it a 6 with a ceiling of a 6. It's usually going to play at that ceiling of a 6. That floor of a 4 is if you're not sure what you want it for. If you don't, like, destroying an artifact or enchantment with cycling is great, but also being able to block, you can chump with it and then draw the card is nice. It doesn't stop everything you needed to stop, but it stops enough. I love that they did this. Manifest Dread. Manifest Dread. I want this to have an alternate art without, actually, I'm going to check. I'm going to see if the alternate art doesn't have the reminder text, because I will buy that. They didn't even give us an alternate art. Maybe they have and we just haven't seen it yet. Does the foil have the flavor text? Or the reminder text? Card's just good. All right, so archetypes for blue-green with Manifest Dread the card. You want this card for blue-green Manifest. You don't want this card for green-white Survival. You want this card for black-green Delirium, and you will play this card in red-green Delirium. You would rather have a Wildfire Wickerfolk, but Manifesting Dread on turn 2 isn't bad. This also, you play this card in Delirium because it's a sorcery that puts a land into your graveyard. That's half your Delirium on your 2-mana 2/2. So yes, this is a 6 in blue-green and black-green. This is a 5 in, well, it's closer to a 4 most of the time in red-green. And this is a 4, honestly, this is probably a 3 in green-white survival. You do not want this card in green-white. It's a 3 in green-white. 3 in green-white, 4 in green-red, 5 in black-green, 6 in blue-green. There's the line. Okay, Moldering Gym. This is a slow but powerful card. So 3 mana, go get a land, that's bad. 6 mana, make a 5/5, put a card in your graveyard, that's bad. Putting them on the same card is pretty interesting. There are some cards that you that unlock a room. So you can lock and unlock a room. This card is a 6 when you have those cards. It's not about what else, like how slow you are or how your deck is built. When you have cards that let you cheat on locking and unlocking doors, this card is good. I like it a lot. Theo, it's not about this card being bad in red-green. It's about the alternatives. We haven't gotten to red yet. The red 2-drops are absurd. They're so, like, the red-green 2-drops are stuff like Wildfire Wickerfolk, but it's not that Manifest Dread is bad in red-green. It's that the competition is ridiculous. Well, but it's not, because Manifest Tumbleweeds would get you a 7/7 or an 8/8. This only ever makes a 5/5. If you can manifest something that you can flip up, it's very good. Ooh, I let that steep for too long. Still good. All right. Up next, Monstrous Emergence. This is a safe bite. This lets you bite a creature, but since it's not in play, your opponent can't murder your creature in response for it to die. That's fair. I've always been evaluating the manifested creatures as blank 2/2s. So this being a 5/5 that flips up is nice. All right, Monstrous Emergence. This is a better green removal spell. It's a bite that you get to play safely. It's a bite, like, it's worse if you top deck it and have an empty board, but you're losing that game anyway. But you can bite without your opponent being able to kill the creature in response. So it's a good kill spell. Welcome back, Haiku. All right, up next, Overgrown Zealot. So this is a cool card. It's a 2 mana 0/4 that makes a mana. 2 mana of any one color to turn a permanent face up. That'll happen, not too often. But this one, it's uniquely bad in this set, in Duskmourn. So it looks very good. Pack one, pick one. You might look at this and say, well, this is a great card. But in Duskmourn, it is a lot weaker than usual for a few reasons. First of all, your 3-drops are incredibly powerful in green, and your 4s are weak. So you don't actually want to skip your mana. Like, you would rather play a different 2-drop and then cast your 3-drop and then cast your 4-drop on turn 4. Your 3-drops are very good at enabling your turn 4 plays. Secondly, this doesn't stop a survival creature from attacking. Like, your opponent will still attack with their 3/3 survivor or their 2/2 survivor. But you and this doesn't do that. So this is playable. You would rather have most other 2-drops available in green, including Manifest Dread. However, when you have the 4-drops, either in rare or in black, there's some good black 4-drops, then it gets a lot better. When you are actively interested in skipping your third turn play, then this card is good. But I don't want to plan to do that in this format. I want to plan to play my green 3-drops, and different green 2-drops, and that makes this not worth a slot a lot of the time. But it's good for splashing, and it's good for playing 4-drops in other colors. So I don't pick it early, but when I have those things happening, I will take the Overgrown Zealot. It's also like green black has some good 4s, and a little more interesting in blocking for the sake of blocking, because you can probably outvalue the survival creature. But cool design and weak in this set. Weaker in this set than it would be in just about any other set we've had. Patchwork Beastie, 1 mana 3/3, 1 mana 3/3. So earlier when I was saying it can be worth taking a turn off to enable your Delirium, that's because of cards like this. Your turn 1 Patchwork Beastie, turn 2 Say Its Name, turn 3 3-mana Delirium creature, or turn 2 Delirium creature, turn 3 take a turn off to enable Delirium. Now you're attacking with the 3/3 you put down in turn 1. It's also not a bad thing to draw in the late game to just have a 3/3 off the top of your library in the late game. Yesterday when we talked about Delirium, we sorted the Delirium cards into cards that require Delirium, cards that don't require Delirium, and cards that wait. And this was the poster child I used for a wait. Because this card gives you Delirium eventually. You don't... Turn 1, this is a card that waits for Delirium. Late in the game, this is a card that needs Delirium. But very cool in that deck in general. I gave it a 5 because it's just... the 4 is probably going to be lower. Yeah, we're going to lower that floor to a 4 because you do need to have access to... You need to care about your graveyard. And most green decks care about the graveyard. But it will be enabled incidentally often enough that I'm happy to just put it into any green deck. And having 2 types on your 1-drop is awesome. Wee Bestie. Isn't it pretty cute? I love this card. I love the flavor of it. It doesn't know it isn't real. I'm sorry, Haiku. I do not watch wrestling or know who Joe Hendry is. I can respect calling it punches. Bite is just the first one I saw. Up next, Rootwise Survivor. This is a cool survival card. It is mostly a survival card. A 5-mana 3/4 is not a guaranteed attack, but if you're putting on enough pressure, then there's a good chance that your opponent is not going to have a blocker up. Strangely, this card is often going to be better in a non-survival deck, because if I'm a survival deck and I have a 3/3 and a 2/2, my opponent is actively leaving back blockers. So my opponent's less like... I want to play this when my opponent doesn't have a blocker. That's more difficult to do in a survival deck. But a 5-mana 3/4 haste that makes a 3/3 every attack is good. That's very good. I like how many things they gave us to use our lands for. So I'm going to go ahead and lower that floor to a 3, but I'm pretty happy with it at a 5 in general. You just have to think about how you're playing with it and how you're enabling it. Say Its Name. Next, good timing, Haiku. All right, this card is really powerful. I gave it that floor of a 5. It's not mill 3 cards and return a creature or land from among the milled cards. It's any creature or any land. This is a set where recursion is powerful. This is a set where milling yourself is powerful. And it is a sorcery. So, like, it's not unlikely that this enables Delirium on cast. I gave it a 5 with a floor of a 5. It's usually going to play near that floor of a 5. Because if you're not I mean, it'll be a 3 or 4 if you don't care about having anything in your graveyard. However, pick wise, if you want this card, you got to take it early for the cool factor. Exile this card and 2 other cards named say its name from your graveyard. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Search your graveyard hand in our library for a card named Altenac, the thrice called. Put it onto the battlefield. So, yes, this is a great version of this card. Like, this is the thing is, you can search your graveyard too. So, like, you can pitch Altenac early and still pick it up. But if you have a deck with 3 of these, you're not like you still have a shot at doing the thing, right? Like, if you play a say its name in mill 3 and then play a mill 4 and choose 1 and then put 1 into your graveyard with Delirium or with Manifest, it'll still work. Like, if you might get through 30 cards in a game in this kind of deck, and then you'll get to do this. And you can, like, even just cast the Altenac and let your opponent kill it and then use this. It's really good. Like, you don't have to, like, we've seen this kind of effect where you get so much more value for having more of them in the past, but you don't need to have 6 say its names. You can just run 3 say its names in an Altenac. You really only need, like, Altenac might have a higher score, but you really only need 1 Altenac in your deck. And you need 3 say its names, and then you just play the game normally and will occasionally do the thing. It's like, it'll happen. Like, it'll happen more than is reasonable. Yeah, that ceiling of an 8. Once you have 2 of them, then you first pick that 3rd one. Branch Snapper, reasonable reanimation target, solid threat, 6 mana, 7/6 trample is a good way to end the game. You can put it into your graveyard for Delirium. You can cast it. I don't actually. I did this one first, and I went back and revised it. But it is not quite that free. But it's going to be a 4 most of the time, and then it's a green just had access to better finishers than I thought initially. Yeah, what's up, Haiku? How did I do that? All right. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, you gotta read it 3 times. Okay. Spineseeker Centipede. I think this or say its name is the best common in the set or in green. 3 mana 2/1 that becomes a 3/3 with Vigilance. That's all. Like, getting any basic land is good. A 3 mana 2/1 that draws a card is good. 3 mana 2/1 that attacks as a 3/3 later is great. This is enabling a lot of splashes, and if you're green, you should take it pretty high. I don't think you play it in every green deck, is the thing. Like, it is playable in every green deck, but there's competition for it in every green deck as well. But we'll go ahead and give it a revisit. Like, getting a creature into your graveyard is just, for Delirium, it's just not that hard. But the problem is taking turn 2 off is a huge cost. Like, taking turn 2 off to the land cycle is a huge cost in this set. And I came back and decided that later, so that's why I had it at a 5 initially. Like, if you force cycle on turn 2 and then your opponent plays a 2/2 that draws a card that after it attacks because you didn't play a 2-drop, and you're going to lose that game on turn 2. It's not going to feel like you lost right away, but that's going to be why you lost. All right, up next we have what is tied for the best green uncommon. Yeah. This card at its floor is a 4 mana 2/2 that puts a land into play. If you manifest a second card, then you put a land into play. This isn't once each turn. If you manifest 4 cards in a turn, you go get 4 lands. This card is absurdly good. Yeah. Just really powerful. It's reminiscent of Trail of Mystery, but the lands go into play, and like once you start manifesting, you never stop. But you will very quickly find yourself with 15 lands in play, and no lands in your deck if you with one threats around every corner. Like your first threats around every corner is a 4-mana 2/2 that goes to get a basic land, and your second threats around every corner gets you 2 lands. Yes, it sees the one it manifested itself. This is Solemn Simulacrum. This is a Solemn Simulacrum upgrade. The card is better than Solemn Simulacrum in this set. Like, because that Solemn Simulacrum can also turn out to be a 7/6. I like this one because it's a like it's a vibe. I like this name, but I don't actually think the text matches it that well. Yes, this is true. It triggers Eerie. Fair enough. All right, up next, Under the Skin. So this is a cool card. 3-mana Manifest Dread, and then you may return a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. This doesn't target. So if this said, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand, you would have to choose the target when you cast it. Now, as it doesn't say that, you choose the target when it resolves. That means you play this Manifest Dread, put a permanent to your graveyard, return that same permanent into your hand. This is a good card. This is a nice piece of recursion. It is divination with choice. It's divination with choice that puts a 2/2 into play. So it's not tempo negative divination. It's strict card advantage that every green deck wants to play. I don't know why. I guess it's going to be a 6 ceiling because it is just a 2-for-1. But I guess nearly always going to play at that ceiling of a 6. This is true, Haiku. This card is just very powerful. Look at the top 2 cards of your library. Yes. Look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put one into play and the other into your graveyard or into your hand. It's really good. This is the best version of you may return a permanent card from your hand that we've seen. Curious Forager. It's like Curious Forager out of the last set, but with much better things to return. Yes, no more true Ewits. Wary Watchdog, 2-mana 3/1 that surveils one twice is pretty good. 1 toughness is a bit of a liability in this set. We've seen this card be really good in the past, but like it's a little. So Wary Thespian this is a reprint, but it's a dog. Surveil is better, but being a 3/1 is worse. So this is a card that you're gonna want to play in any green deck, but you don't have to go really hard on it. You'll be fine. Yes, it is a dog. Yes, it's cool because it's the exact same card, but it's gonna play very differently in this set because it stops a no, because the dog dies, Haiku. If the dog didn't always die, if this weren't a dead dog on board, then it would be a 5. But dogs are 5s. Dogs dying are at 3. I have rules. It does when it dies, but like it. I agree, Carl. Yeah, but you're gonna kill your own dog a lot of the time in this set. Sorry, it's truth. All right, up next, Wicker Folk Thresher. This is up there for best green uncommon. Like it's a 4-mana 5/4 that draws a card on attack. Really good. If you have 3 Wicker Folk Threshers, where to go? That 2-mana 0/4 gets a lot better. Here we go. Overgrown Zealot gets better the more Wicker Folk Threshers you have. All right. That is it for the green cards. So you do need Delirium to draw a card, but you should have Delirium at this point. Like, if you don't have Delirium when you play this, you are doing it wrong. You can also splash this card in other decks that get Delirium easily. Yes, this is a good Delirium payoff that is a Delirium enabler that is only 4 mana. Great card. All right, what do we have left? Red and blue. We just did green, so let's do blue as the other side of it. And then we'll do red last. Oh, I need water. All right, 2-minute break to drink water, and we're going to do blue next. Sorry, if I don't take a break, my voice gives out, and I have a long stream tomorrow. Red's very different this time, Haiku. I think you'll like it. Be right back. Here's a song. We're doing one song. No. 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 Yeah, this will work. 3 minutes, 47 seconds. We'll be back. I get so into the music, I just want to listen to the music. All right, 2 colors left. We can do this. We can do this. Always feels weird not having music on. All right, blue. So blue in general on this set, I gotta check my notes. Blue has a lot of highs and lows. Wait. There we go. Blue has a lot of highs and lows. They have a lot of very powerful cards and a lot of very weak cards. And your job as a blue player will be to try and find the synergies that bring them up. So first off, we have blue, white, Eerie. You need your payoffs first, so then the removal. You gotta take your removal kind of high, but you can take enchantment-based removal. Then protection for your creatures, and then other enchantments. When you're drafting blue, you need to figure out which creatures are most important. Like, what do you need the most from each of these creatures? Gremlin Tamer is really good, but having 2 Gremlin Tamers then changes the rest of what you're doing with your deck. Thank you, Haiku. Figure out where your card types matter. Do you need Delirium? Not really. Blue White doesn't have any Delirium cards, so it's mostly enchantments, creatures, and having the right ones at the right time. The removal you have access to is actually really good. There's some crazy blue removal spells in this set, and weak blue removal spells that you can pick up a little bit later. And then your sequencing is important. Like, when you have a series of cards that care about other cards coming into play, then you have to think a lot about when you're playing them. Like, can you hold off a turn to play your Gremlin Tamer to protect it? Can you hold off a turn? Like, can you play a worse removal spell here because the other one is an enchantment? Sequencing. Blue Black Eerie Grind, we did talk about this one already today, but first you need your survivability interaction. You can decide what that looks like, and it's going to change a little bit based on your focus, whether you're on the graveyard or enchantments. And then your win condition is going to change a little bit with your focus. And then, oh wait, I changed this on the other one. Card advantage is last. So your card advantage will come kind of naturally, and you have a lot of engines you can set up. But if you're focused on enchantments a little more, then it changes which removal you want, what your survivability is. If you're focused on your graveyard a little more, you might be manifesting dread a little bit more. We'll look at the blue cards. It'll make a lot of sense. Figure out how you're answering their engine. How are you dealing with the crazy things that they're setting up? And then figure out how you're winning. And so the big ones that you have access to for winning, you can fly, you can mill them out, you can outvalue them if you have a good, like, you can just kill them with 3 Fear of Infinity if you're valuing them enough. And then bombs. If you have good, powerful bombs, rares, you'll get them eventually. You can build a deck that gets them eventually. Up next, blue-red rooms. Your first and most important thing are your rooms that kill, your removal rooms. We'll look at those in red, and there's a few in blue. But like there's a 3-mana deal 4, and there's a 1-mana unsummon. Then you need your payoff rooms. So Misty Salon is a good payoff room. And then your mana. So there's a lot of good ways to generate mana. You actually end up with so much removal in red and blue that you want to focus on the right card types for it. So you want to be either tempo or control, and looking at just looking at the signpost uncommons for blue red, is a pretty clear delineation. So we have, Intruding Soul Rager. It's a 2-mana 2/2. You have to sack the room to deal the 2 damage, but then Misty Salon makes a creature whose power is based on the number of rooms you have in play. So they're kind of counter to each other. Like, are you trying to fly over and burn them out using rooms to snowball out of control? Or are you trying to use rooms for value to just survive until Misty Salon starts making 6/6s that you can recur? All right, our first card is a room. It's a really important one. It's blue unsummon. So Bottomless Pool is a sorcery speed unsummon that also triggers Eerie. And the other one, whenever one or more creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, is a very powerful grind. It's really good. The thing about Bottomless Pool is that it's not a creature an opponent controls. You can bounce your own creature, and this is a set where you have a lot of things you might want to pick up. If you manifest an instant, you're going to want to pick that up for later. If you manifest a bomb that you can't flip. Like, Unsummon is a good card. Unsummon on an enchantment is a great card. That's a 6, And Locker Room is not something you'll start with most of the time, but it has the potential to generate a lot of card advantage over the course of a game. This is a powerful room that you should pick highly if you want to play rooms, but you can still just play. Like, this is a set where Bottomless Pool is good. This is a set where 1 mana bounce a creature is good. Give it a 6, floor of 4, ceiling of 7, medium effort. Yes, Theo, this card is. It always does something good. Like, it keeps you alive, it clears blockers, it forces things through, but it's also not something. It doesn't work in a vacuum. This is why the base rating isn't higher. Like, you need to have. Yes, this is true, but that's why you'll need to pick it kind of high if you want to be the rooms deck. Some of the rooms are not. Next, Claiming Prowler. This is an enabler for cards that. So this card is bad on its own, but it enables very specific cards. So if you have those cards, there's a 2/7 that when it ever deals damage to play, you draw that many cards, and there's some survival triggers that are worth splashing blue for or splashing into your blue decks. Then this card gets a lot better. It's a kind of weird win condition because late game, if you're trying to force through a win condition, your opponent can block this with 2/3/3s and kill it. It's only going to work once. But it's not, it has, this isn't a generally good card. This is a card that works with specific other cards. And we're going to talk about some of them. All right, Creeping Peeper. What a cool card. 2 mana, 2/1, solid body. That makes mana for enchantments or rooms. If you can use this mana, this card's a 5. If you can't use this mana, this card's a 3. So you want to make sure you can use this mana. Compared to the 0/4 mana dork, this one does block, so I'm pretty happy with it. But like, you need to make sure you have a deck that can utilize this mana to play this card. Cursed Windbreaker. Wow, we have come so far from Winddrake. This is a Wind Drake that leaves behind a flying equipment. Compared to the other one, that's going to be a lot more relevant. I'm just happy to play an artifact that manifests and has flying. Blue does not care about its graveyard at all inherently. If you are with green, you will. Like, other colors care about the graveyard, but manifest is only good for the body in this. Also, you can flip up a creature that has flying. No, this is the opposite of a cryptic coat. This is a flashy jacket. It will never be a cryptic coat, and it doesn't have to be. Daggermaw Megalodon. This is not the land cycle you want. Blue should not, like, blue does have a little bit more time to island cycle because blue is more likely, like, there's 2 mana counter spells. You can hold those up, pass a turn, and then island cycle if they don't play a spell. But it's a reasonable body. Like, this isn't the finisher you'll end up with a lot, but you're fine playing it when you don't have other finishers. It is awesome art and a scary looking card. It's a shark horror. It's not even a shark horror. It's just a shark. It is a, scary one. Don't make a sound. 2 mana counters target spell. Like, quench is fine. This is fine. It is, you have better counter spells available. You have better cards available. The surveil would be more relevant if blue cared about the graveyard at all. But like, blue doesn't have a ton of 2-drops, so having 2 mana spell to counter what your opponent's doing is good. And late game, there's some big spells. Like, I'm lowering the floor to a 2 because your opponent is not guaranteed to have a deck that plays late game spells. Your opponent might have, like the big spells, but they might just be unlocking a room. Like, even if your opponent has a 6 mana spell, and they just play the bottomless pool and then unlock the locker room, and you have no opportunity to quench it. I do think that this is. Oh, you're right. I mean, like, it's not a terrible standard card, but it's not great either. I'm gonna lower this. I'm not gonna be happy playing this card. There's better counterspells available in blue. Duskmoor's Domination. This is 6 mana destroy target creature in blue. Like, you give a creature -3/-0. Like, this is 6 mana O-ring. You get to block with it. Your opponent can't attack if they have a disenchant. If they don't have disenchant, they just attack into it, and it's not going to kill anything. If your opponent has big enough creatures that it still matters, then this is fine. And it's a sideboard card. Like, if this is a fine sideboard card if your opponent is playing Like, it's got to be at least a 5/5. If your opponent is playing 5/5s or bigger, then it's better than a simple removal spell. But that's not going to happen too often. But yeah, cool card. Not good. Like, this is removal that you will play but not be happy about playing. Why can't it just be loses all abilities or -3/-0? All right, up next, enter the Enigma. Cycling is good in this format for 1 mana. This is a relevant ability. Giving a creature unblockable is a good way for blue to close out a game. It's a splashable card if you really need a way to close out the game. But there's enough good cards in blue that you're happy to play this. Like, it's an okay card in a vacuum, but it has a place in every color combination. Like, it enables a survival trigger, it enables an attack, and it's a sorcery for delirium. It's fine. We'll talk about a card that we want to work with. Yes, if you are a blue-green deck with a random survivor or a blue-white deck with a random survivor, then you're happy to play this. And it's delirium for blue-black, but like, it doesn't have a place in blue-white, and it's often the worst thing that you'll be doing. But it does combo with specific cards. Like our next one, Fear of Failed Tests. 5 mana, 2/7. When it deals combat damage to a player, draw that many cards. You get to draw 3 cards with an Enter the Enigma on a Fear of Failed Tests. I think Fear of Failed Tests is pretty cool. 7 toughness is a huge amount in this set. There's a card that deals 6 damage at common, and there's a lot of cards that deal 3 damage or give -3/-3. If you grow it a little bit, it's awesome. I like this one because there's only like 4 people afraid of it, but they are very afraid of it. Oh no, I'm sorry, Haiku. I still dream about going to classes and failing tests there. um, this is a cool card though. I think it's gonna play really well. 7 toughness is a lot, and it's work to punch it through. But there's a lot of like, this is a set designed to have ways to help punch it through. Yes, it's people who died from this. So people who die from a fear become, that's what these faces are. My theory is that the stronger the amount of fear matters. So like, Fear of Surveillance has a ton of people in it, but it's only a 2/2. All right. Up next, Fear of Falling. 5 mana, 4/4. Like, this is an air elemental. 5 mana, 4/4, but it's really hard to block. If your opponent has a 5/5 flyer, it loses flying. Like, it also makes it like, if this is your only creature and your opponent just has a 2/2 on the ground, it disables a creature for an attack. This is a deceptively powerful ability, and making it a really good win condition for blue. I gave it a 7 with a ceiling of 7, floor of 5, low effort. It's a cool card. Fear of Imposters, kind of a trap. If you can recur this, it's a little better. Like, if you can pick up Fear of Imposters, bouncing it, or when the first time you counter a big spell and your opponent gets to manifest, they're going to be like, that's not so bad. The 4th time you do it, your opponent's only going to have 2/2s in play, and you just have to make sure you're building your deck to block them. It's not minus. That's not the right way. It's a 4/4 flyer for 5 mana. The thing is, Temno, a 4/4 flyer for 5 mana is almost good enough. Like, 5 mana 4/4 flyer is good. That is something that I will play in a lot of decks, not every deck. But this is a 5 mana 4/4 flyer that can't be blocked. Like, what if this were 5 mana 4/4 unblockable? I agree with you, Haiku. Right. Like, this is specifically for limited. So Fear of Falling in limited is a 5 mana 4/4 unblockable that gains 2 life each attack. Yes, your opponent needs, like, if your opponent has a 3/3 flyer and a 10/10 flyer, well, they have a 3/3 flyer. The 10/10 flyer is now an 8/10 on the ground that can't block this. And it lasts until your next turn. So it also disables something for a whole combat. This is blue's win condition. It's going to feel really bad when you're trying to chump it. But even if you're not trying to chump it, if you have 2/2s on the ground and your opponent is just disabling one of them every attack, you're fine. Fear of Imposters is a weird one. Your opponent gets to make a 2/2 when you counter a spell. It has a place, but that place is in a heavy, high power flyer deck. Like, if you're winning in the air, this card is a lot better. But you need to make sure, like, the amount of hurdles you have to jump through to make this card playable is really high. You need to have a deck that wants to hold 3 mana up on your opponent's turn. You need to have a deck that handles 2/2s really efficiently without putting in a lot of work. And you need to have a deck where you're not worried about the creature your opponent can hit off this. Like, sometimes it is going to be worth countering your opponent's rare, or countering your opponent's fear of falling. Like, but it's not worth it on turn 3, and it's not a tempo swing. That might be true, Theo. I have not looked at them. Fear of Isolation. 2 mana, 2/3. If you have to pick up a land, it's fine. 2 mana, 2/3 with flying is just really good in this set. Like, it's an enchantment. 2 copies of this card let you trigger Eerie back and forth. Okay, good to know, Theo. Let's hope the removal gets there. Yeah, 2 mana, 2/3 flying that goes back and forth with itself. It lets you trigger Eerie. There's a lot of things you want to pick up. There's a lot of rooms you want to pick up. Fear of Isolation plus Bottomless Pool is 3 mana, bounce 2 creatures, or 3 mana, trigger Eerie twice. This card is very good. Yeah, like, even if you have to pick up a land, like, and replay the land next turn, you're not going to be too upset. But there's a lot of stuff that's just worth picking up. If you're picking up a manifested creature so you can cast it, that'll feel really good too. Floodpit's Drowner, I kept raising this one. Like, blue is short on 2-drops in general. A 2 mana 2/1 Flash Vigilance would be good enough. A 2 mana 2/1 that locks down a creature for 2 turns is great. A 2 mana 2/1 that is also 4 mana, take a creature out of the board, is great. It shuffles itself into its library. It keeps you from milling out. This card alone means you cannot deck. You have to take it pretty high for a lot of the self-mill strategies. You will splash this card in your green-black self-mill deck so that you don't mill out. So, yeah, you can, there are going to be control decks that actively create situations where this is the only card in your library, so that you just every turn, end step, so you'll have to tap your opponent's creature on their turn, untap, upkeep, shuffle this into your library. So make sure you set that upkeep stop. But this card is always good. This is a very powerful Magic card. And yes, it is also a Merfolk. This might be modern playable. Up next, Get Out. 2 mana counter target creature spell is great, but this upside is really good. Like, there's so many good things for blue to pick up. Picking up rooms, picking up the creatures, triggering Eerie. Like, having this be a counter spell that isn't a dead draw off the top is awesome. Merfolk's real. Merfolk is like top 8ing events in Modern right now, Theo. Like, Harbinger is just so good. The blue Harbinger of the Seas is really good in Modern right now. And like, blue runs needs a few creatures that blue Merfolk's big weakness right now is that it doesn't have a way to get things off the board in Modern. So Bloodput's Drowner is a reasonable but not powerful solution. Keybearer. 4 mana 3/3 flyer is almost good enough. This card is only good when you're saving mana on rooms. But like, if you build around this, it's very powerful. So I gave it a 3 with a floor of a 3. You don't necessarily have to be a rooms deck, but you have to be you have to put effort into it. Like, Keybearer, and then untap on turn 5, you play a normal spell, Bottomless Pool to bounce your opponent's creature, and unlock the locker room. Like, that's really good. But you need like 5 rooms at least for this card to be worth it, which is difficult, but that's that ceiling. I like this card though. Like, this, it's cool that they made a rooms card that only rooms once. I'm very excited to draft room. Yes, there are some very good rooms to unlock. Glimmer Burst. 5 mana draw, 4 mana draw 2 cards, make a Glimmer. So like, I talk a lot about how the problem with strict card advantage spells like Divination is that they leave you behind on tempo, and your opponent gets a good attack in. Well, making a 1/1 Glimmer is a good way to prevent that, and it triggers your Eerie at instant speed. You need to be a kind of controlling deck, but this is a good version of this card. Okay, that's a really good question. So, how good is a 4 mana 3/3 flyer in this set? The answer is great against creatures, bad against removal. Being a 3/3 is a liability. There's multiple very powerful 2 mana removal spells that deal 3 damage, Beard. But this is not easy to block. There's no good the reach creatures are 2/3s generally. So, and there's a 5/3 reach. So yeah, so the reach creatures are a 5/3, a 2/3, a 2/3, and there's a 3/3 that trades with it, but it's like 4 mana also. So it dies to more removal than I wanted to, but attacks 3 more creatures than I would have expected. Okay. The next room we have Meat Locker and Drowned Diner. This is a really weak room. You only want it because it's a room. 3 mana stun a creature for 2 turns is bad. 5 mana draw 3 cards. Discard a card is bad. And the thing is, in the rooms deck, both of these things are done much better by other rooms. I would rather bounce a creature for 1 mana than lock down a creature for 2 turns for 3 mana. I'd rather just unlock rooms that affect the board than draw cards on my rooms, but it's a filler room. It's a weak room, but it does its job. This is a little more powerful in the tempo room deck. If I have a bunch of the 2 mana 2/2 that sacrifices a room, then I'm a little happier playing with this. Also, this is a really good room to unlock with a Ghostly Keybearer. And it's enabled by it. So this is a pure rooms card. You want this in rooms decks that care about rooms, and you don't even want it in every rooms deck. But when it's good, it's going to feel really good. Right. Thank you, Beard. Fundamentally, rooms are 2 cards in 1 card. So you don't actually need to spend a huge amount of effort generating card advantage for your rooms. You need to spend effort generating time. And like we said yesterday, time is something you have to buy. You have to spend cards on time. Okay, so this is one of those 3 toughness 2 drops I was talking about. That's just insane. So now it's just Manifest Dread, draw a card. It's a 2 mana 1/3. Whenever you Manifest Dread, draw a card. There's not a ton to say about this. And it's draw a card of your choice. It's draw one of the top 2 cards of your library. The other one goes into play. Manifest it. This card is so powerful. Ridiculous in the Manifest deck. This is an 8 in the dedicated Manifest deck. This is a 4 if you only have a few Manifests. It's a 4 if you have 0 Manifests, because your opponent still has to spend a real spell to kill it, because they don't know you don't have any other Manifests. Yes, Theo. That is what I said. Wait, what? 2 mana 1/3. Whenever you look at the top 2 cards of your library to put one into play, put the other into your hand. There are so many ways to manifest for 3 mana. This card is absurd. Yeah, this is it. Pack one, pick one. This is probably also an 8. Yes, you do have to show them. You have to show them the card that's going into your hand. That's a fair point. I'm raising this. This is too good. You should just take this card. Your worst case scenario is you take this card in a deck with no other manifest, and you get to pull your opponent's Scorching Dragon. If your opponent on turn 3 has to decide between a 3-drop and a Scorching Dragonfire, they Scorching Dragonfire your Analyst. They spend Premier Removal to kill this at the loss of their own play, even if you have no other manifest cards in your library. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. The thing is, the blue-green one is better if you aren't manifesting, but that one is better if you are. So the blue-green card we're talking about here is Oblivious Bookworm, which I actually gave a similar rating. It has a higher floor. This card is better if you don't manifest that turn, and it's better on the turn it comes down. But generally, this card is going to generate more value. This also works more than once in a turn. All right, up next, Piranha Fly. There is an aggressive Flyers deck where this has a place, but it's not any of the main archetypes. So you don't want to rule this out outright, but there is an aggressive Flyers tempo deck, and I don't hate it in blue-red rooms either, because you play this on turn 2, and then you have things to do with your cards the rest of the game. Flying is just powerful in this set. So generally weak, but it has a place, so don't dismiss it outright. A 2-mana flyer is a good attacker, even if it comes in tapped. This is not relevant because you're hardly ever going to block with it anyway. Scrabbling Skull Crab. 1-mana 0/3 that blocks. You can mill your opponent out in this format. You can build a mill deck in this format. This is the only mill card, so you need multiple copies of this card. Blue does not care about graveyards, so you don't want to actively mill yourself with this too often unless you are trying to set up a combo lock with a Flood Pit's Drowner, which is the thing you can do in this set. Excited to try it. It's not jumping through hoops when 30 cards in your colors do the thing. Scrabbling Skullcrab, really good. Not really bad most of the time, really good enough of the time that I love it. I will try to build a mill deck at least once, I'm sure. There is not another card, common or uncommon, that mills your opponent. But if your opponent is milling themselves, you might be able to sneak this in near the end. Like, if you have 3 Skull Crabs in your deck, you're going to want to hold them and try and mill them out after your opponent mills himself a little bit. Yes, 2 is, you're right, 2 is probably enough. Like, so let's math it. 2 crabs, 4 enchantments, is 16 cards. Usually in a game of limited, you need to mill 25. Yeah, I can see it. Stocked Researcher. So blue wants to do things in the late game, and this is a good blocker. And the only deck that doesn't want to do a bunch of things in the late game is the Eerie deck, where this gets to attack normally. This stops survival, and it's a reasonable attacker on a reasonable body, but it's fine. Like, it's just fine. I like it. I'm gonna go ahead and raise this. No, it's fine, because it's usually, even when it feels good, it's usually gonna play like a 4. Because you'll have to play your things pre-combat to attack with it. But it does its job. They didn't stay silent. Really good removal spell. 2 mana to keep a creature tapped forever is great. 6 mana to get rid of it permanently. Well, it shuffles it in, so they can draw it again. But it also makes a 2/2. It leaves a card behind. Like, this is gonna play. It's like Bitter Chill out of Wilds of Eldraine, but you get to put a creature into play instead of drawing a card, and you get to do it when you want. I like it. Good removal spell. Blue has some very good aura-based removal spells, and that's great in a format where playing an enchantment triggers things. Tunnel Surveyor. I actually came down on this a bit. Like, it's a 3-mana 3/3 spread across 2 bodies that makes an enchantment, but that's not as good as it has been in other sets. Like, 3 mana for 3 power is good, but a 3-mana 3/3 that makes an enchantment, like, you need to put some work in this set compared to in the past. Triggering Eerie is nice, and this is a good thing to blink. Yes, but like, it's not great. It's good because it triggers Eerie. It's not great because it triggers Eerie. You gotta just remember the standard for what a good card is in blue. Uh, like, this is going to be filler. It's going to fill in the gaps. In an Eerie deck, this is a 5. In other decks, it's a 3 or a 4. But like, this isn't a format where you care inherently about having a huge number of creatures. I do like this card, but you don't need to pick it as high as like a preening champion and mom, right? All right, Twist Reality. This is good. Cancel is fine. Manifesting Dread at instant speed is very good. Like, neither of these are what you want to spend 3 mana on, but being able to pass the turn with 3 mana up and then not be shit out of luck when your opponent doesn't cast a spell makes this card a lot better. Yeah, being able to, like, these 2 options on 1 card is great. Yeah, so you do have, that's a good point, Kaiser, about the crab. That's why you have to be careful about milling them. Like, you can't, there are some decks where you don't want to mill them at all, but a lot of decks you just have to time your mills. You don't necessarily want to play this turn 1 blind. When you play with the crab, you have to bank it and play it with a bunch of other enchantments at the same time. Yes, blue wants to be very heavy blue. Yeah, counterspells are good in this set, and this card, like, this is a set where cancel would almost be playable, but being cancel or making a 2/2 makes, on the same card, makes this card good. This one creeps me out. It's a 1 mana enchanted creature is an O2. This is a very good, like, 1 mana, destroy target creature, your opponent gains some life. We have spells like that, and they are legacy playable. Like, then that's how it's going to play most of the time. 1 mana, trigger your Eerie. Your opponent's creature is an O2 with no abilities, and it's going to block a creature. It's a road bump later. But if you're a Flyers deck, which a lot of the blue decks are Flyer decks, you're not going to care anyway. Like, this is a very powerful removal spell, and it might look a little weak based because we've been conditioned to look at this card as weak. It's a 5 because that's just generally this should probably be higher. I'm giving this a revisit. Like, the thing is, any enchantment like this that your opponent, in a format where your opponent can kill the enchantment at instant speed, means that they have the potential of getting to create a combat trick against you. But this is a very efficient removal spell. Yes, blue doesn't get we'll talk about this. Blue doesn't usually get efficient removal because blue is so good at drawing cards. And if you're able to draw 3 cards for a card in 1 turn, and also deal with what your opponent is doing early in the game, that's too powerful. But this one's really good. Like, blue has if you get to kill your opponent's creature for 1 mana and then level up a room, it's going to feel like a really good turn. But yes, this is a very powerful, this is the kind of card where you're like, you look at this and you're just like, oh, well, I'm used to giving my opponent an 06 with Defender being bad. Like, we usually look at this version of this effect and think this is bad. This is really good. All right. Our next room, 1 mana Surveil 2 isn't worth it. 4 mana 3/3 isn't worth it. So that makes this a room only card. This is very good in rooms. Like, rooms that make bodies are good in rooms, but otherwise you don't want to play this card. You only want it in the... There's just a straight up aquarium in this house. Cool. 3 mana, bounce a permanent, manifest dread, really good. Like, bounce a permanent, draw a card for 3 mana is something that we've seen be good a lot lately. But you can bounce your own permanent, and the set where there's permanents you want to bounce is also a non-land permanent, not just a creature. Like, you can bounce your opponent's unable to scream and get in there. Blue has, I think blue and red have the best removal this time around, which is interesting. Like, the reason that I am not crazy concerned about the rares, Theo, is that the removal is so good. There's really good removal. Oh, yeah. So this is Mana War. This is Mana War, but you can turn the Mana War face up later. And it's a non-land permanent, not just a creature. This is a really good card. I might just be a 6. We'll take a look back later. I'll give this one a revisit, because the only real linchpin is, like, how many of this card can you run in a given deck? Might be a lot. I think I'm raising this to a 6. Feels really good. All right, up next we have Unwilling Vessel. This is an eerie payoff. Like, it is a 4 mana 3/2 that dies into a 1/1. You're happy. You do have to put a counter onto it for it to die into a 1/1 with flying. But, like, it has the potential to die into a 6/6 with flying. 4 mana 3/2. Like, once you have a few rooms down or a few enchantments down, this card is insane. But you have to have the enchantments. Like, this isn't a free powerful spell. So 3 to 7 is usually going to play somewhere between a 3 and a 7. You also have to try and make sure that you can kill it on demand, if that's possible for you. Like, you don't want to bounce or let your opponent exile it. All right, last blue card, Vanish from Sight. It's the worst blue removal spell. You'll still play it sometimes because it's a blue removal spell, but blue has really good removal in this set. Blue has 1, 2, 3. Where's the last one? Hide in plain sight. The hiding one. Where'd you go? Where'd you go? Here we go. Stay hidden, stay silent. 4 very powerful removal spells, as well as 1 very good counter spell, 2 okay counter spells, and a bounce room. Blue's interaction is incredibly good here. Blue control is going to be a powerful archetype. Oh, all right. We're moving on to red now. And I'm going to just check on my... I have some stuffed peppers in the oven. All right, I'm back. Oh, I know what you mean. So Blue used to get these tap spells, and they're gotten so much better. All right, we're gonna go a little fast here, but red is awesome. I'm just tired. Today was a hell of a work day. All right, so red, last color of the night. Last but not least, red is really cool in this set. Red green delirium aggro. You want your power cards first, then your removal, then your enablers, then your pump spells. There's some cool pump spells. Figure out what your plan is to get delirium, whether you're going to be doing it naturally by attacking and trading off resources, or spending a whole turn. You'll have to spend a whole turn to place your delirium spells. And then figure out how you're forcing your attackers to. You can do that with just like natural growth by hitting delirium and making this a 4/3, or you can do it with removal. There's some good removal available. And then figure out what your kill is. You can do some combo kills in your red green. Red black sacrifice. You need your power cards first, powerful cards, key cards like Saw Blade, Skin Ripper. Then your value cards, because you're gonna have to recoup some of the value you lost sacrificing your permanents. Then the cards you are sacrificing, things that you want to sacrifice, and then removal. You don't need quite so much removal, but you do still need some, because you get to use removal spells that other people don't. Then figure out how you're dealing with the giant creatures, the big ones. There's some cool ways, like you can do that with removal. You can go around them, you can threaten them and attack with them. And then finally, what's your win con? How are you ending the game? You can grab and fling. You can feed a whole bunch of things to one creature, burn them out. You have options. And then red, white, weenies. You need your payoffs, then your anthems. There's not as many anthems in this set as usual. There's only a few. One of them is a room we'll be looking at here. Just ways to pump your whole team. Then your removal, then the weenies. You will get the weenies. Figure out what you're doing with your creatures early, because you can use them for value or can use them for attacking. Up first is our red land cycler. It's not that this land cycler is worse, it's that red is worse at using land cyclers. There's not a red white is sorry. The lance this there's not a place for this. Like, red doesn't need to fix his mana. Red doesn't want to take turn 2 off to Mountain Cycle. Red doesn't want to reanimate. Red doesn't have much delirium. Like, they have delirium, but they're good at getting it, and this is not a helpful card for getting delirium. So it just doesn't, it's homeless compared to the other ones. Red white only feels weak because it's not aggressive. Like, red white is more of a control deck, weirdly enough, which I think is going to be really cool. All right, up first we have, so Next, we have Betrayer's Bargain. So 2 mana, sack a creature, deal 5, exile the thing. Great. 4 mana, deal 5, exile the thing. Pretty good. So this is a good card with a lot of upside. Exiling is a valuable thing. Betrayer's Bargain is a good removal spell for only 2 mana. Boiler Bilges, Ripper, like 5 mana 4/4 is kind of weak. If you have spare permanents to sacrifice, this is fine. It's not the best sack outlet, but Boiler Bilges, Ripper, you'll get it late. You have to both want to sack the creature and want to kill something for 2 damage. But it's okay. It's just fine. Clockwork Percussionist. So I gave this one a 5 with a ceiling of a 5 and a floor of a 3 because it's a 1 mana Raging Goblin that gets in early, and then you're very happy to sacrifice it late. You're also not upset if you just chump block with it and get some value out of it, but you have to build around it. You have to make sure you can cast it. I think red-white might be, like, you will have aggressive builds, but a lot of the time it will be a more controlling deck. And sometimes it'll switch to aggro. It'll be more of a mid-range deck, but it'll be a low-curve, mid-range control deck. It's going to be really interesting. It just looks very different from how we've seen red-white be recently. Diversion Specialist, a really powerful sack outlet. 4 mana 4/3 with Menace is solid on its own, but being able to turn every card into a fresh card is great. And it's only 1 mana. It's only 1 mana to sack. Good stats, good body, good plan, solid engine. It's a good card, Diversion Specialist. Gave it a 6 with a ceiling of 7 and a floor of 4. Not even just once per turn. That's right. Like, you can dig deep for a card you really need. This is a cool one. So Fear of Being Hunted must be blocked if able. If this is a removal spell for your opponent's 2/2, it's going to feel pretty weak. But there's a lot of good ways to make it survive the combat. If you can give it First Strike or Indestructible, like there's a white creature, a 3 mana 2/4, whenever it attacks, give another attacking creature Indestructible. Well, it's likely going to free up the 2/4 attacker and make this a 5/2 Indestructible. This is a really, like, this is a card that you can build around. And it looks like it's aggressive, but really this is a control card that you can build around. Yeah, and sometimes your opponent won't have the 2-drop. Like, this is another card that makes this green 0/4 really bad. Like, if your opponent plays a turn 2 Overgrown Zealot and you get to attack, you're just going to feel like you won the game. There's also, like, you can take out 1/3s with it, which is really relevant with how strong some of the 1/3s are. Like, if your opponent plays the Paranormal Analyst and you play a Fear of Being Hunted, you get to kill the analyst and keep your Fear of Being Hunted. And then what's your opponent going to do? They have to sacrifice the next creature they play to this. And if your opponent plays a 2 mana 1/3, you attack your 4/2 into their 1/3 and they have to block, it dies. Then they untap. They can play a 4/4, which they'll have to sacrifice. But then they risk you having a combat trick. Like, they don't get to tap their creatures on demand anymore. This is a very, like, this is a build around. This is a build around creature. It's a build around creature with haste. I love it. We're going to look at one that gives First Strike soon, and there's already one that gives Indestructible in white. Fear of Burning Alive. So this one's getting a revisit. If this is a 6 mana 4/4 that deals 4 damage to your opponent, okay. If this is a 6 mana 4/4 that deals 4 damage to your opponent and 4 damage to target creature, it's going to feel like you won the game. The second copy of Fear of Burning Alive deals 4 damage to your opponent and 4 damage to 2 creatures. And the third copy deals 4 damage to 3 creatures. So this is Delirium mandatory. You better have Delirium by turn 6 if you are a Delirium deck. Like, if you don't have Delirium by turn 6, that's on you. But, like, yeah, it's a lot like, Sko is a good comparison. It's weaker than Skoa, but so is the entire set is weaker than Modern Horizons. So the thing is, it also means that, like, when you ping your opponent, you get to kill a creature. Like, it's not just the 4 damage that this deals. All burn you fire at your opponent also hits a creature. APK. I would have loved battles in the set. I love battles in general. So yeah, I gave it a 7 with a ceiling of 7. I think it's going to play near the ceiling of 7. If Delirium is harder to trigger than I think, then I might not. It might not. But I think red is gonna be more of a controlling color this set. I don't think red is that like this is the kind of card that red wants to cast. Like this is a great reanimation target too. There's a lot you can do with it. Powerful red uncommon, I think is going to play really well. Up next, so this is one of the most important rooms for the rooms deck. 3 mana, deal 4, and then you can turn it into this will eventually win you the game. Slowly, not efficiently, but that's fine because you already just did 3 mana, deal 4. And 3 mana, deal 4 kills. I don't remember the number. 86%. Kills 86% of the creatures in this set with late game upside. Also, if you turn 5, I don't know that this won't be played in non-room decks, Theo, and I will explain why at the end of the red. You're like here. So you might have missed this yesterday. Do these numbers seem really high to you? Like usually it's like 1/1 damage, 1/2 damage, a -3/-3, a deal 4, and a deal 5. All of the deal X damage spells, there's so many. Red has so much burn. There's so much burn. So like your opponent will people who aren't on rooms will take different burn spells over this. But if you get to pay 5 mana and ping your opponent and then turn 6, Fear of Burning Alive, that ping on your opponent also pings a creature. Yeah. Like Shattered Yard is not something you're going to pay 5 mana for unless the game has completely stalled out. Right. I want to give this Death Touch and then use Shattered Yard to deal 1 damage to them and then use Fear of Burning Alive to make that 1 damage kill a creature. It's going to happen. Grab the prize. This is up there for my favorite this is up there for my favorite flavor text in this set. So this is Tormenting Voice. You discard a card and some amount of the time you'll deal 2 damage to your opponent. Like this card is good for enabling Delirium and for digging for specific things. There are better ways to enable Delirium, but it's solid. I'm gonna go ahead and lower the ceiling because the ceiling is if you're using it to enable Delirium, but it's usually gonna play near that ceiling of a 4. Hey Troy, good to see you, bud. How was work? But yeah, unfortunately, the keyhole turned out to be located in an even larger, scarier clown mouth. Is up there for favorite flavor text. All right, up next we have Hand That Feeds. 2 mana 2/2, bad. 2 mana 4/2 with menace, very good. Yes. Discarding the card is a cost. Don't let your opponent counter this spell. Although it does let you shock a creature with the Fear of Burning Alive out. Yeah. 2 mana. If you have Delirium on turn 3, this card is gonna feel so good. And if you don't have Delirium on turn 3 or turn 4, this card's gonna feel really bad. I get it. I get it, Merit Liege. Thank you. But yeah, so 3 in a lot of decks, 5 if you have reliable, fast Delirium. This one's also getting a revisit, because if this is just deal 6 damage, draw a card at common, that's very good for 5 mana. Like, you're not likely to whiff this. You will almost always get to play the card, because you can play it the following turn. You can also burn something at instant speed. Like, this is the best version of 5 mana, deal 6 that we've seen in a while. This is good. This is splashable. You need Delirium for this card to be good and splashable, but, like, I will play this. Yeah. This is a powerful common removal spell. Stronger than we've seen at this mana at Fred. Yeah. 5 mana, destroy target creature, draw a card. If this is how this reads, this is a good card. If it's 5 mana, 6 damage, it's bad. And there's not a lot in between, right? Like, if this draws a card every time, it's a 6. If it doesn't draw a card, when you cast it, it's a 3. Ooh, Infernal Phantom. So this is a wide gap between the floor and the ceiling. This one's tough because you want enchantments and you want to be able to sacrifice it on demand. Like if this is a 4/3 that attacks for 4 and then deals 4, you'll win. It's almost like a combo card. This will be like it'll feel like a combo card, and you'll get to set up some pretty crazy turns with it. It's gonna feel so good when you get to play 2 enchantments and then a pump spell and then fling it. But yeah, I like this one. Like your fail case is a 4-mana 2/3 that shocks on death, and it's not great on defense, but there's a lot of instant speed enchantments, and there's a lot of ways to pump it on your opponent's turn. Cool spell. I'm excited to try it. I actively want to try this one. It's really good in the sack deck. I think this card is actively powerful in red black sack, and everywhere else you need to pair it with specific cards. So I gave it a high effort value. Oof. All right, so remember earlier when I was saying, well, red has better ways to enable Delirium at 2 mana and better ways to receive a payoff at 2 mana. This is the kind of card I was talking about. This is a 2 mana 2/2 that is going to rummage a lot, and it has menace. This is better at enabling Delirium than Manifest Dread for red-green, and it's a great card in general. You're okay just sitting on it too. This is also one of the reasons why red black will not reliably hit 7 mana. There's a lot of powerful rummage like this. You'll stop playing lands eventually. Just a really good 2-drop enabler. Most Valuable Slayer. I think this card is excellent. There's so many creatures that benefit from this. There's menace creatures, there's survival creatures, there's Fear of Being Hunted. Turn 3 Fear of Being Hunted, turn 4 give it First Strike is really good. Like a 5/2 First Strike that they have to block every turn. Yeah, he's eating the candles. He likes them. He's irreverent. So this is a 4 mana, like this isn't when it attacks, it's when anything attacks. So you always get this trigger as long as you're attacking. And First Strike is very powerful in this set. It enables so many different attackers. I think this is going to be one of the better red commons, but it just works with so many things. The Most Valuable Slayer. So I think like he wins Saw. Is that what his story is? Wow, we have a lot of good red cards all in a row. All right. Yeah, this is good. You should play it. I think I will splash this in the survival deck as well. I think this gets splashed in green-white, and Naya is going to be a thing. All right, Norin is back. Like, why is Norin here? Does anyone know why Norin is here? A 1-mana 2/1 that can't block is good in aggressive decks, tough in general. But this ability, blinking your creatures, there's a lot of payoffs for it. There's a lot of good creatures to blink with Norin. Most of them aren't red, strangely enough. There's not, like, this is the only really good red creature to blink. But it's so good to blink. It just makes it so that your opponent has to make bad blocks, but you have to be kind of aggressive. Just know that red isn't automatically aggressive in this format. You can build a red aggro deck, but it's not automatic. So, like, you can't just jam Norn into any red deck. And it's not even based on the archetypes. Like, red-white weenies is not inherently aggressive. Red-green delirium, yeah, actually, red-green delirium is inherently aggressive. But red-white, red-blue, and red-black all have modes, different speeds. That's one reason I'm so excited for this set. Like, I loved Bloomburrow, but your Bats deck always played the same, and your Lizards deck always played the same. Your red-white weenie deck is going to play really differently draft to draft. That's cool. That's good design. I'm optimistic. All right, our next card is the third red room. Cowards can't block. It's true. And cowards can't block warriors, and Northern sees everyone as a warrior. All right. So 3 mana, draw 2, kind of. But 2 mana, grow your team is important and something that is difficult to get. So red-white weenies struggles for this effect. They struggle to make their small creatures better. The red-white signpost uncommon to make 3/1/1s really wants this card. So, like, the modes are nice. You can also, so compared to other versions of this effect, you can play the Defaced Gallery on 2 and then just chill on the Painter Studio until you're ready to make sure you can cast those cards. There's also like the 4 mana 3/3. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, it unlocks a room. You can unlock the Painter Studio with that, and you'll have that mana to play these cards with. There's also a the blue-red signpost room. The that makes 2 mana only for room spells. That's a really good way to spend mana on the Painter Studio and then cast the spells you draw. It's very likely that you can draw 2 and get full value out of the Deface Gallery. All right, what does Norn trigger? Set Duskmourn Oracle enters. Here's what it triggers. The big ones are... it does trigger Eerie on some creatures, but the big ones are Patched Plaything. So I did make a list. Patched Plaything and Unsettling Twins out of white. It lets you pick up... So, like, if I manifest Dread, a Cursed Windbreaker, then I get to exile a Cursed Windbreaker and cast it. So, manifest Dread cards in general, it works with. Anything that's Eerie, Tunnel Surveyor in blue. I guess it doesn't trigger that much. Like, mostly I was looking at it as a way to recover the manifest Dread cards. But there are a lot of Eerie triggers that it works with. Yeah, Norn doesn't save that much. A lot of it might just be untapping the creature, too. There's not as much that triggers this as I thought. So we're going to go ahead and drop Norn to a 4 and raise his difficulty to high. All right, good point. Thank you, Beard. All right, I like this room. Both modes are relevant to certain decks, but they have a lot of synergies. I'm very excited about rooms, Troy. So, okay, rooms are going to be like talents without the third chapter. Rooms are going to be like talents without the third level, Troy, which some of those are great and some of those are not. Yeah. All right, up next we've got Piggy Bank. Just hyper efficient. 2 mana 3/2 dies, makes a treasure, is an artifact creature for Delirium. This is what all the Delirium decks want to do. Weirdly weak in red-white, but your opponent's not going to want to trade with this. Like, they don't want it in your graveyard. They don't want you to have 4 mana on turn 3. The good, efficient 2-drop. The 2-drops red has access to are ridiculous. Yeah. Red has such good 2-drops. And, like, blue's 2-drops are pretty weak. Green's 2-drops are pretty weak. But red's 2-drops are insane. Yes, that's fair. Just powerful. You don't have to put a lot of work into playing it. It's almost always going to do what you want it to. Very good. Pyroclasm. You got to build around Pyroclasm. When you have Pyroclasm in your deck, you have to build your deck differently. But Pyroclasm is not about what it kills on your opponent's side of the board. It's about what it kills on your side of the board. Like, it's got medium... It's a good card in this format. You are likely going to kill 2 of your opponent's creatures with it. In general, Pyroclasm should kill 2 creatures on your opponent's side of the board, which means that you need to build your deck so that it doesn't kill any creatures on your side of the board. That's not an easy thing. Pyroclasm is a very self-centric play. Yeah, I actually see that, Troy. It does look like a Storybook Brawl character. The crabs, you have 3 HP, Beard. I think red, like, the fact that red has Pyroclasm is a big part of what makes it feel like it can be a control deck. Ragged Playmate, solid card. Like, it's only a 4 because of the competition it has at 2 mana. But making a creature unblockable is good. Like, forcing specific creatures through or making your survival creatures unblockable is good. When you have specific cards that you're trying to connect with or little combos to set up, it's better at a 5, but being an artifact creature for Delirium is great. Yeah, Pyroclasm is one of those cards that defines standard. Rampaging Soul Rager. This is only good in the Rooms deck. Don't play this if you're not in the Rooms deck. It's very good in the Rooms deck. The end. Best red card? No, I don't have this as my highest rated red card. Oh, and we have not seen my highest rated red card yet. I have it tied with Fear of Burning Alive, but this card is a 5 mana 4/4 with haste that makes a blocker. So you get to attack and still block. It doesn't make an attacking creature, which means it blocks well. There are cards that care about gremlins. This card is good. Play it, splash it, enjoy it. It even triggers stuff. Also, I love the typing. It is a human clown berserker. Up next, Rip Chain Razorkin. I'm usually going to be pretty happy to play the first copy of this card. Like, sacrificing a land to draw a card is nice. 5 power for 4 mana is nice. It's usually going to trade down. It can trade with some 3/1s. Yes, this doesn't need to attack itself. It can attack with other things to make the 1/1, and then those 1/1s can make the 1/1s after that if you need to leave it back to block. The Razorkin's solid, but you don't want a ton of them. 3 toughness is a liability in this format, but sacrificing land to draw a card is really good in a lot of decks. So I like the first copy. Yep. The red has a lot of flood insurance in this. Scorching Dragonfire. Card's just good. It exiles, it kills, it's 2 mana. 2 mana, deal 3 damage, kill a creature at instant speed is powerful. And this is a set where exiling it is really good. Play Scorching Dragonfire, take it high. 3 mana, Manifest Dread, fine. 6 mana, attacking creature gains double strike, good, but 6 mana is a lot. So this is a Rooms card, but it's not bad for enabling Eerie or Delirium. It's cool. I like it. But it is mostly just fine. I gotta lower the score a little bit. I like that it's a tunnel of hate instead of a tunnel of love. But yeah, red gets an extra room. It's nice. All right, Trail of Agony. So this card is inherently aggressive. If your opponent chooses 1 of 2 creatures to sacrifice, and they have to have 2 creatures in play for you to cast it, then they're always going to get rid of the worst creature. But it also makes it the other creature unable to block. So if you're very aggressive and trying to get attacks through, this card's really good. This is another card that I would be very happy to splash in the survival deck. I don't think red is default aggressive. So if I am not aggressive, I don't want this card. And if I am aggressive, this is a 6. This card is a 6 in an aggro deck. All right. Mercurio, hey buddy, you caught me near the end. We've only got 5 cards left, but I'm still happy to see you. Hi everybody, I'm Scuffle. I mostly do educational content. Today we are doing our full set review for the purposes of draft. It's really good to see you, Merc. How's your stream? What were you up to today? Aw, thanks, buddy. I'm wearing Eevees today. I hate how happy this guy looks in this picture. Yeah, like, this is a card. So, 1 mana Manifest Dread is really powerful. 1 mana Manifest Dread is good. You don't have to play this on your creature. If your opponent is winning the combat anyway, you can play it on your opponent's creature, and you'll get to Manifest Dread for 1 mana. This puts you halfway to Delirium. You might even make your opponent kill your own creature. Yes, this is really good in a set where you want to put cards into your graveyard. But also, like, if your creature has double strike, then this is 6 damage. 1 mana, deal 3 damage to your opponent is good. And it combos with a lot of stuff. This is a very powerful trick that is likely to yield a lot of value. The only reason you wouldn't play a ton of them is because you need some creatures. But yes, this card is really, really good. This is the most powerful version we've seen of this effect, and this is standard playable. Yes. Wait until you get to the last card. Oh my god, wait until we get to the last card. Untimely Malfunction. So I was trying to figure out a way to play this card as much as possible and tell other people not to. I think this card is great. Changing the target of your opponent's murder is really good, but like changing your opponent's turn inside out is not. But this is a card you always play this card in a very aggressive deck. I will usually play this card in a mid-range deck, and I like it. I will be really happy to play with it, but you need to predict accurately what cards your opponent is going to play and what removal spells they have for this card to do what you want it to do. There are creatures enough to kill it, and so like black and red have artifacts that you want to kill. Blue has spells that you want to change their targets. Well, you don't steal it. You just change the target. So they still get to manifest. But I like this card. I will be playing with Untimely Malfunction more than I should because I love changing targets of spells. Threaten. This is the best Threaten's been. So you take a creature and then you loot, you rummage, you discard a card and draw a card. But the sack outlets are so good in this format. So I gave this a full 6. Like I will splash this in a black deck pretty much every time. It probably needs to cap at 6. Like it's not going to be better. There's really good things to steal, but your opponent also gets to sack them. I got to lower this to a 5. Yeah. So we're going to do a 5 with a floor of 4 and a ceiling of 6. But this is a really good threat. Like, you will threaten and rummage in an aggressive deck. You will threaten and sack it in any black deck very happily. So the Bro threatens were good because they also took artifacts. But the Bro sack outlets, I think is as good as the Bro threaten. I think it's exactly as good as the Bro threaten, the sibling rivalry. Yes, if you steal a manifest, you get to look at it. Good point. If you control the manifested creature, you get to see what it is. Vicious Clown, it's a good attacker in the power 2 or less deck. You don't really want it elsewhere. I'm going to go ahead and raise the difficulty, but we're keeping all the numbers. All right. Finally, the highest rated uncommon in the set, Violent Urge. I gave this the highest rating out of any common or uncommon. Honestly, it probably should not be an 8, but because I'm not going to take it pack 1, pick 1 over the blue-green one. But if I am red, yeah, so I should probably lower to a 7. Because I'm not going to run it in literally every deck. But 1 mana give double strike is absurd in this set. Yeah, I mean, like, 1 mana give, like, this is going to win you the game so often. Like, having this card in your deck warps the way your opponent has to play the whole game. If you have attack in the box, if you have a 6-power creature in play, your opponent can't take that from 20. Like, so yesterday I gave this attack in the box a 3 instead of like a lower number. That's because this is a 6-power 3-mana attacker. This wins the game on turn 4. You attack for 6 and give your creature +3/+0 with this 1 mana combat trick, and then +1/+0 in double strike. That's 20 damage. Like, it is so easy to deal 20 damage with this card. Your opponent will know you have this card and still not be able to stop you. If you have 5 mana and 3 cards in hand, you can win the game from there by Vengeful Possessioning, turning inside out, and Violent Urging. The thing is, okay, this is the good point, Thane. I was happy to run Coming in hot in my aggressive decks when I wanted to play it early in the game, or when I had 3/1s or 4/2s or creatures that got a lot out of the tricks. Like, when I had a card like, where are you? Like Fear of Being Hunted, I was really happy to play Coming in Hot or Kindled Fury in that deck, right? The problem is, later on in the game, as the game develops, and on turn 5 or 6, I was really upset to play Coming in Hot. But as the game develops on turn 5 or 6, I have Delirium. Like, on turn 2, I will play this card as a removal spell to win a combat. On turn 5, I will play this spell to win the game. And this spell wins the game. Like, there's only 3 kinds of decks. Like, either we play this early, and we use it as a useful combat trick, or we play this late because we're an aggressive deck, and this is how we win the game, or we are controlling the game, locking things down, and this is our combo finish. This is how we win that game. Like, I would always play Kaya's Fury, right? Or Uncaged Battle Rage, because I'm good at combat math. And if you're good at combat math, this is going to win you the game. Yes, this is an uncommon. Tier Battle Rage also costs twice as much. Yeah. Like, this is a very good card. This is a standard playable card. This is a up there for best red uncommons. Like, I will take Violent Urge over a lot in this set because of how good First Strike is in this set too. Yeah. You will win so many games with this. Like, I think 8 was jumping the gun, but I did want to drive home how highly you should take this and how powerful it is. Okay, everybody. Merc, thank you so much for the raid. I'm really sorry you caught me right at the end of this. But if anybody has any questions or anyone just arrived, I'm really happy to help you out, talk you through it. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., I might be a little late, but hopefully at 10 a.m. we are starting our it's early access. Tomorrow is a streamer event, so I will be drafting this set tomorrow morning all day. I set aside a whole day for it. Like, I'm gonna have to stop at night, but we're gonna be testing all these theories, seeing how this works, seeing how we compare to some of the best players in the game, all of the best streamers. 10 a.m. Mountain Time, likely 10:30 because I have a thing at 9:30, and we'll see how it goes. But yes, tomorrow is the streamer event, early access from Wizards of the Coast. I'm going to be doing as much as I can. I'm going out of town on Thursday, so I want to get packed up first. You're welcome. That was super fun. Thank you everyone so much for hanging out. I know that was a lot, but hopefully that made you better at drafting. I will see everyone tomorrow for early access. We will test out theories. If you want to see something tested, we'll do that. But it's just me and like a lot of great Magic players. It's gonna be a good time, and I'll try and get a primer out. This weekend I'm going to something called the Barbecue. Oops, wrong one. I meant to raid. This weekend I'm going to something called the Barbecue, which is a cube event where we rent out a big mansion. I'll try and tweet it and keep everybody in the loop while we're there. But thanks for hanging out. That was the whole set review. I will try and I don't think I'm gonna do rares this time on Mythics, but I will decide after I look at all the rares and Mythics. Tomorrow we're playing with the set all day. We're drafting and we're testing theories. See everyone tomorrow.